Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Charlie Iker can't be with us personally, but he's calling in, so that'll be good. And Ruben, we're gonna turn the floor over to you.
Sure, thank you. So since the last time that we met, we had some numbers, fairly large difference between the proposed budget and the default budget. We've had some changes since that time. Prior to getting into that, I just want to point out that we have several individuals here in the audience who can speak perhaps at some times when we have questions that might be better directed toward a specific school or department. And so we have the principals of the schools here. We have the director of facilities, director of special education student services, and the activities director as well for the district. We have at the table, of course, the individual who puts the entire budget together through the system and looks at all the laws and makes sure that we're doing things above board and accurately. We have Carrie Broderick, the CFO of the organization, and of course the rest of us here. Welcome to the Ringe and Jaffrey Budget Committee members as well. I'd like to start off with reading an email, and I won't read it word for word because I'm not going to identify who sent it my way. Pull it up here. I had it a second ago. And I thought it really was nice, laid out a little bit of what we've been trying to work on for the past several years. And so this individual writes, my child goes to JRMS. They're in one of 6th, 7th, or 8th, and has been to several different schools since the 1st grade. There have been a lot of difficulties, and he's having stability. He's making really great friends, has such a great attitude about going to school. He's improving in all aspects and is improving even on being his shyness. He's coming out of his shell in a sense. Not afraid to speak up in class now. And he's having the best time with the after-school co-curriculars, and the individuals' teams are named. And one of those teams is an opportunity that was provided this year to all kids because of our policies around cutting and so forth. And there's a lot of appreciation there. There's some other things stated, but it was really great to hear, years ago when I first came here. And I think in many school districts, when it comes around to middle school, you hear sometimes the opposite. Well, it's a difficult time. Maybe there's bullying that goes on. Maybe there's a lot of behaviors, things of that nature, and people not getting along or just not fitting in. And to have someone else who's had all of those experiences through their short educational career, their young, I should say, not short, young educational career, have that reversed within the past several months, I think is a nice tribute to the work that we're doing across the entire district. And that's not a clear quantitative data point. There is some quantitative information in here, but it's a good qualitative piece that kind of talks about the energy and the depth at which our instructors and our schools are operating. So thank you for indulging me with that. I think that's what we're here for. All right, getting to some numbers. The last time we met, we had a tough spread from the proposed to the default. The default, of course, is higher than last year because things are more expensive. We also have more needs in the area of special education. We have more needs in the area of facilities. We have more needs in the area of transportation. And so we had, however, based upon prior information that was given to us by our legal counsel, we had a number that caused us to be very far off our proposed. Now, our proposed was also saying, these are the things we feel we need in order to run optimally. I'm going to suggest some reductions today on those, not all, but some of those. But I also have to give an extraordinary amount of credit to Carrie Broderick over here, who spent 3 days looking at several different laws here and then pulling out and this was based upon some feedback that we also got from the finance committee about find out what is required by law and to look at laws having to do with transportation, laws having to do with building code, laws having to do with still building code, career and technical education, and our responsibility with that. Anytime there's a shall, it's important for the default bucket. Lots having to do with that one. Laws having to do with food and nutrition services. Laws having to do with, well, actually, there are several laws that we had to deal with transportation because we had to look at definitions of what a school is required. We actually had to take some trips, calling the bus company, finding out exactly, are there any runs that if we were to not have within the definition of a 2-mile radius, that we could, cut a run, for instance. And there was one that we potentially, we wouldn't be able to cut it because of our contract and so forth, but we wouldn't be able to include it necessarily in our legally mandated default if. However, there are some safety elements to it, and there's no way that walking to school from the spots that they are at in this town would be remotely safe, especially during the winter months. So 6 months out of the year, ice, snow, and so forth, no sidewalks or very poor sidewalks, when they do exist, it would not work. So we felt pretty good about including that in there. There was only one that didn't fit that definition. Air quality in schools. The fact that the law states we have to provide a specific learning environment, having to do with the heat and the humidity and the temperature, and to make sure that, all of those elements that are talking about our facilities and of course the rise in costs. So through that process, we talked, we had about 45 minutes to an hour conversation with Gordon Graham. He sent us some legal information through email as well. Anytime we had a question and we said, well, what about this topic? We'd go into the law, find it, contact him, get his opinion, and so forth. So we feel like we made some good progress this way to narrow that gap just from default standpoint. Carrie has all the backup documentation, if ever, requested, as to how calculations were found, what, Bureau of Finance and so forth, or whatever, websites and so forth she had to get the estimated fuel rates, going forward. It's a lot of work was done. So I really want to say thank you, because this right here shows a difference of an increase to the default of $437,614. That does not, of course, narrow the gap all the way, but
So I'm sorry, so you increased the default, but not the proposed.
that's correct. These were all increases to the default, not the proposed. There are no increases to the proposed in this from last time. And as we go through this, you will see decreases from the original proposed.
And by the way, I just would like to encourage all of our budget advisors and board members, if you have questions as Ruby makes the presentation, please feel free to ask. You don't mind, I'm sure.
I don't mind, but if it's going to be about that, then Harry will be the one answering the
Sure.
question. So we'll be
No,
good.
that'll
That'll be good.
Well,
Because it's there are a lot of spreadsheets, there are a lot of calculations, and it's a technical process, so it will take some time.
yeah, and so we just want to make sure that everyone does understand what we're talking about and what it is that the group is putting before us. The law around default budgets has changed significantly in recent years. And our attorneys and our CFO have been working hard to understand those changes and in some cases sort out what they actually mean.
So rather than having that roughly 1.9 million, we're looking at 1.4 here in this case. Difference between the default and the proposed just off the bat. Go to the next slide. And we look just at the general fund, because I think it's important when we talk about taxation that, we're talking about the general fund. So this is the general fund, the default versus proposed. And you can see the default is 28,218,000 and some change. And the proposed is roughly 29.5 million. Still no changes from what we had before. And the difference there in the general fund is $1.25 million. So 1,255,152. Go to the next slide. This is just a reminder of the proposed as it is anyway, as it currently is, of the changes to the world we live in. A budget that has, since I've been here, either been 75, 76, up to 80% of the entire operating budget to be down to 70% tells you the increases in these other areas. Some of them because we want to continue to improve, others because of inflation, higher costs in the area of student services. At least a correlation with, and perhaps causation with the pandemic and the aftermath. We talked about the increase in the last several years of from 12 to 17 out of district placements. That number could increase. I think that's an important conversation we have to continue to have, because we want to look at the patterns. The patterns so far are that we're getting more learners who are dysregulated, have higher needs. And dysregulated doesn't quite give you the picture, and it's happening earlier. I went to a couple other, Carrie and I had searched for some budgets that had already been talked about at other places. Elementary budgets are increasing. Now, we don't have the detail. My guess, because their population isn't increasing, my guess is it's very similar for very similar reasons, because there are needs at that area. We are certainly not an anomaly. It is normal across elementary schools to have higher needs right now. This budget, I think, what I have not taken out is some ability to potentially develop a plan and have a little bit of funding to start to relieve that stress at the elementary level, and then also try to at first slow down or stop the out of district movement, and then perhaps down the road bring people back. And that's planning for the future. It's going to require a couple years of budget work. Many things that were in this year's proposed budget, that the numbers that I haven't changed yet, would be necessary in order to, the assistant principal would be necessary to have in the school, and one in each school, in order to be able to effectively have the support to make sure that those programs have redundancy and admin support. So in the end, the hope would be that you'd actually break even or save a fair amount of money down the road. But we do have to make some investments, or at least attempt to do so. Now, just because we attempt to do so doesn't, I mean, we have to have the right people with the right certifications. So if you don't have those, you can't start new programming. So we understand that the conditions have to be right. So we'll go to the next slide. Possible reductions. I have to thank the individuals that are out here in the audience, again, the individuals I introduced earlier, for going through their budgets together. They have, here are some things that we could put, prepay, perhaps, if we had the ability to do so. Here are some things that we really don't feel comfortable moving forward with if we're even going to entertain having conversations about staff cuts during this time frame. And then, of course, if we get into conversations about later on about what would default mean, they're well prepared to have conversations about that. And to ensure that I don't slip with any information that is confidential in a sense, I would want them to be able to have the opportunity to speak if that conversation comes up. I default to me is not at all appropriate. We shouldn't even be considering looking at that. In looking at these budgets, Pelham was one of them. They started off, was it 2014-15 when I came here? They had the same budget that we had at that point in time. We've gone up a couple million since then, maybe 3 million. Obviously, it's these last 2 years have been tougher. And in the meantime, they've gone up to closer to $40 million. That is not unusual. They're a bigger place, of course, that's fine. It probably shows that we were a little high early on at that point in time, but we've done a really good job over the years to try to keep those numbers down. And we up until this budget, trying to keep it under that 30 million mark. So you can see the numbers up here. I think we can't ask for an elementary assistant principal at $136,000 if we're again going to entertain other reductions of personnel. In order to, however, alleviate some of the needs that are there, or to help with the needs, the central office is going to have to continue to support and when necessary or when needed. We have some work that we're doing that we cannot slow down or stall. And so while I don't think that we can move forward with a pre-K out of district coordinator, the concept in looking at all the numbers and the structure of our elementary and student services organization and knowing how things are going, having and budgeting for at least a part-time pre-K individual, someone to oversee pre-K would be good. It's a $65,000 roughly savings from what was proposed. That could be we could look at that and say, wow, that maybe not what we want to do, that may not be the way we want to move forward, but maybe we take that money instead and we, for instance, use it to help support the development of a new program over at one of the grade schools to be able to get some self-contained support. You know, so it's all the same number of dollars, basically, is what we're talking about. SAU salaries to help support some of the, to kind of match that whole reduction. And understanding that having a part-time pre-K in theory is helping to even out some of the workload within the SAU, and that's a working condition, you know, reducing by 1%. This was a conversation at the finance committee. And so that's what that number reflects right there. I hesitate to go any further than that. We were doing it at 5%, understanding that cost of living right now is now 8.1%. And though we don't do blanket percentages across the board, we do try to have enough money in there to make sure that we do an analysis of where each position lies as it is per, you know, in the market. And so sometimes we have to do 10% increases because of market increases. Sometimes you have to do 2%. It varies, but you want to have enough money in there to do that sort of thing. So it's not all about just flat raises or anything of that nature. And some of us have contracts that don't permit raises that high anyway, so it's fine. Or don't on paper allow that. So student services had a variety of things that, you know, we can hold off and try to see what our grant funding is like. These are areas that we will need in a couple of years. We wouldn't want to not have it. So we've done the research. We know what it costs. This, of course, could be more expensive the following year, but that's just how it is. We could reduce by 44,000 there. There's nothing left to take out of student services without doing significant damage. Facilities, there's a variety of lines, mostly having to do with furnitures and fixtures and outside cleaning services. That is in a tune of about 45,000 that we could reduce. There's really nothing else from facilities that we feel at all comfortable touching. We feel very good that we were able to put a lot of the utilities back into the facilities areas, and that's a lot of the increase in the default. And so my calculations are correct. That's a further reduction of 486,679 from our original proposed. So we've had this effect of raising the floor 437,000, taking the ceiling, reducing it 486,000. And so we're narrowing that gap. If we go to the next slide. This is just a pictorial depiction of what we just did. And so you see the difference between the default and the proposed here. Again, these are general fund numbers. I'll show you at the end what it is with all the revenues. That is not as happy a number, but it is all giving you the same tax impact information. So this is now, there's a difference of 2.7% between the two. It's like 2.66 or something to that effect. So of 768,473. So we discussed a little bit last time about other ways of reducing. And we also had a warning from our attorney, and I'll talk about that conversation about how we move forward. However, this number is significantly more manageable than the number we were talking about with our attorney by the tune of 1 million. So if we go down to the next slide, other thoughts that might help. Buy it. So technology, we have stayed firm. We cannot reduce technology. And there's more in the technology budget than what is here. Such as a laptop lease and a couple other things, subscriptions and so forth. We may very well be able to remove one subscription. We're following up on the conversation about redundancy and so forth. If we do, it's going to be about a $12,000 savings, 10 to 12,000. So we're probably fairly comfortable saying we can do that, but got to be careful. I just want to, we haven't had enough time to go through and really analyze that. Moby Max is probably probably the one that we'd end up reducing. So we can prepay technology. Mike had said, you know, half of this we could, like right now, we could use it for the ones that we didn't get this year. I'm saying, you know, this year and next year, that would be the 175. It could be 176, 177. It could be 174. 175 is really what he's been getting some good values, good prices. These are items that John has stated, you know, these things need to be done, or this is equipment that we need in order to maintain the facilities properly. And so you can see that the vestibule at JGS and the vestibule at RMS, that means he'd have to do some pretty quick work. He'd have to know fast whether this was something that we wanted to do, because each of those lines is about 30 or 20 to $40,000. Those are the big ticket items, those vestibule work. That's the doors, the outside doors. And these are things that are not covered by that safety grant. These are things that we should be having already within our budgets for facilities work that we need to do. So getting that done, there's obviously a wait period to get the materials, get the work in. It's expensive. It's ridiculous. I was horrified when I realized how much we spent on those doors over here, those 2 doors over at the middle school this past year. It's just expensive, but we needed to do it. And thankfully they work really well, and they look sharp too. So you can see, you know, we're not steam cleaners for carpets still. I mean, we're not looking to do a whole lot of tiling this year. We're gonna have to keep on making sure our carpets are nice and clean, and that we're providing a healthy environment. Carpets are not ideal, but we can keep on doing that. And we do have some old equipment. If you were to walk around and look at the equipment, you would see that there's a lot of older equipment. Scrubbers, carpet extractors, they're not huge ticket items, but they add up. You know, I think that we've had this conversation for 8 years now, that, yeah, this is only a little piece of the budget, but yeah, when you have 20 other lines that have the same amount, they start to add up. And this is just really about safety. So if we're going to categorize, the vestibules are safety, and the rest of it is just making sure that we have the ability to keep health and wellness going on. And I think maybe the Sawzall and a couple other items is just materials replacement equipment that we just need to do because we don't have the right equipment for our maintenance staff. Elementary furniture needs, not a huge number again, but if there's flexible seating, again, flexible seating is a big one. We see that in the budget, or at least in budget conversations year after year. There's a reason for that. There's good understanding that schools that just have kids sitting in rows and so forth aren't providing our learners the best possible way of making sure that they can maintain their focus within the classroom setting. There are some schools out there that say, hey, we don't have a child-centered environment, and we're going to have rows, and we're going to just memorize, and we're going to do a bunch of, you know, really poor education that goes against 35+ years of research. And there's a school nearby that does that. We can't be that. We can't be like that. We have got to be doing a lot better for our kids. We have middle school, high school furniture and equipment. It spans across departments. That's just a sum. I took out in this because both elementary and middle had some curriculum materials. We took out all curriculum materials from those numbers because really we can utilize the furniture now. We can utilize these other things now. From an audit and an appropriate purchasing standpoint, pre-buying curriculum isn't really what we should make a practice of at all. So these are some very concrete examples that if we had the funds to spend, whether it be through the current unassigned fund balance or whether we, you know, hold off. I don't recommend holding off. I think if you're going to make a decision, we can do it and we act now. We can utilize these things now. I feel good about where we are from a budget standpoint this year. We had the default last year. We made some hefty cuts and we cut more than what we had originally anticipated doing. We've also had some unfortunate lack of hiring in certain positions that in one way helps from this conversation. So we have a little bit of a buffer there. If we were to do this or do something like this, the next slide would show what that would look like. Yes. And that would get you to a $439,000 difference between the proposed and the default. So now you're in a game that's closer to where we were last year. And this is certainly not a number that is outlandish compared to, as you compare the two anyway. It does require some effort and some decision making in order to get down to this spot. If you're to go down to the next slide. I said, what does that look like with revenue? And so if you were to stick all the revenue back in, that means the proposed
You mean the food service and the.
food
general fund?
service,
I mean, the
yes,
grants.
yes, food service
Okay.
and grants. Sorry,
Okay.
I throw revenue is not the right word then. Okay, food service and grants. So if you throw food service and grants back in there, thank you. Carrie did exactly what I asked her to do. If Ruben said something wrong, just correct him. Then we have it's that 30,288,139 number versus the 29,807,253. That's a difference of 480,000 less than the difference we had last year, default versus proposed. Now we go to the next slide. What would a default budget mean? It would mean that it would set our work back. There are a couple of things to consider with that, and that's very, very nice and general. It's actually a very horrifying picture, depending where you end up throwing those cuts and what we're trying to do. So your perspective on this matters, I suppose, the way you look at it. 480,000 is, let's round it to, $500,000. Again, we know what that means from a budget standpoint with staffing. We did that last year. Doing that 2 years in a row, if it happens here at this school, you know what? I think it's important to have the conversation. I was going to ask if you wanted to have it. I think it's important. Could I ask you, David, to explain a little bit of what reduction of, let's say, even similar reductions than what you had last year? So we're not talking you're taking the whole load, but if you had some reductions, what does that mean? Because I even know one would make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, given the fact that last year, we kind of adjusted the entire schedule and way that the school was structured to accommodate the cuts from last year. We are at what I would call sort of the razor thin margin of where kids have opportunities. That's why last year when we had to make the cuts, we had to change the schedule to adjust so we didn't lose any sections or programs. Even with that, there's an entire period of our day right now, our period 2 and 3 kind of sections that are so full that the school counseling office has had to wait until about a week before each quarter to finalize roughly a dozen schedules or so for kids based on where the ebb and flow of learning has taken place because there are just no seats in any classes. So when I say razor thin, that's exactly where we are. When you look at some sections by sections, because of how quickly we had to adjust the schedule, some sections are a little lower in numbers, but others are huge still. We're trying to smooth that out. We just don't have the capacity for any more cuts. So if the board did say we have to cut or we end up in a default budget, I've already brainstormed some ways with the team that can happen, but the impact of that would be pretty immediate. We'd have study halls across the entire building. There's no way around that. And what that looks like is staff using their current team time where they're able to process data and work together. Somebody has to cover those study halls, and it would be the teaching staff during those timeframes. So that's a pretty dramatic about face from the work that we've been doing the last 6 years or so since the strategic design went into place. But that's just the reality of where we would be. It's not an exaggeration. It's not a threat. It's exactly where we are. You know, if this building takes any more cuts, we can't continue the work that we've been doing until we get into a more stable place down the road. I also think it's worth noting that I had 2 applicants this year withdraw their applications from our school for positions that we've been trying to fill because they had heard about the situation we were in the last school year with losing positions. And for a new teacher looking for stability in a job market that's very tight for teachers, when you read that a school has just cut personnel and is considering doing that again, it spooks a new teacher who knows that they would be the first one out the door if a cut was made. So it's another consideration worth noting that if cuts are made at schools a second year in a row to the level that they were last year, that's a further impact on our ability to staff our building and keep people here. So it would be a pretty dramatic impact. I don't know how to put it any other way. And I don't see our work continuing at least for a year or two if that was the case. Yep.
Yeah, you mentioned that you had limits on class size. In other words, had no seats left.
Correct.
I know they vary from class to class. An AP class isn't going to have the same, numbers as something else.
Our AP classes have 29 to 30 kids in several
Okay.
cases. Yep.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but several of them.
Right. So that seems high. Do you have any other, what sort of classes were you looking at?
So this is primarily an impact on our unified arts classes at the moment in that second, third period. Our art classes, there's actually one at the end of the day, right across the hall, a 3D art class that has 30 learners in it. There's one second period that has 30 learners in it. So we're talking mostly about our UA classes that are at that level of concern, where there's just no seats to put kids. So arts, music, physical education and wellness, things like that.
I'll add, I don't know if anyone was able to go to the concert, the middle school, high school concert the other night. Carrie Swift and did an amazing job. Best concert I've been to from a standpoint of middle and high school. Anyway, none of them ever compared to the elementaries because the kids are, a lot cuter at the elementaries and so forth. No, just-
Rude.
I know that was terrible. But it was professional. It was the numbers of kids that were on that stage. That's another issue, is that the number of kids that were up on a stage that had a difficulty holding them. Not that it was shaking. I don't mean like they would not have fallen through. Just but I mean from a size, width wise, and with all the equipment and so forth that they had for band and so forth, to have the chorus and the band doing the same, singing with the live music, it's an improvement. And we see that the arts, which is what we believe is very important for the 21st century learning and creativity and decision making and so forth, they are increasing in numbers. And we would like to see that happen throughout the entire district.
But truthfully, if I had another art teacher, those classes would be full also. I was joking with Ruben that in any other environment, we would be looking at our art and music numbers this last 2 years and saying it's time to add a half or full. That's obviously not a conversation for now, but the thought of cutting back on those areas, it just wouldn't work. We would absolutely have kids with no classes all over the place.
So at the elementary level, if anyone wants to say a few words, I would just say that the elementary level, I think you're experiencing some different situations going on with kids. The world has changed, but also you have initiatives that we're implementing and working toward improving and so forth. And what would reducing, let's say, a few members mean at the elementary level?
Well, for us, our margins are fairly thin as far as what we feel like we have to reduce. So reducing classroom teachers, we would have to look at how are we grouping kids, perhaps making different use of multi-grade level classrooms, which I'm not opposed to philosophically, but have some logistical details that have been challenging for us as a district. We when we get down to having only, say, 2 placements available for a grade level of students, that becomes a very challenging situation at the elementary school because we have many students of need that we want to look at, who works well together, who does not work well together, and having only 2 placements to go into really limits our ability to put kids in a group that is going to function successfully as a classroom community. So that, I think, is really the hugest issue that jumps out at the elementary school, is our capacity to form classroom communities that we're setting kids up for success.
And I would add, and this is not an overstatement, if anything, it's an understatement, is that having a grade level that lacks the ability to do what you said, not only impacts significantly that grade level itself, it can actually impact and does impact the entire learning environment for the entire school. You're not large schools. And so if you drop a pebble in the water and you get the real little ripple effect, that's what happens. The waves continue to go out and it does impact everyone.
I think also, we really focus on providing opportunities that help students to become really well-rounded, considering the whole child. And so thinking about if we were to look in other areas, like the specials areas, we would be removing or decreasing students' opportunities to experience learning that happens outside of the classroom. And I think that, when we think about the whole child, it does not set them up for success in that way. They have limited experiences, limited exposure, and we feel strongly that our role in the elementary setting is to really provide a great platform so that students are engaged and enthusiastic and have a wide variety of experiences, so that when they get to the opportunities that are available into the middle and high school, they have some understanding of who they are as a learner, the things that they're passionate about, the things that they enjoy, because they've had small experiences through their elementary career to set them up to want to take advantage of the things that are on offer the middle and high school as well. So looking at areas where we would potentially cut things there, feels very short-sighted and unbalanced when we think about the whole child and their full experience as learners.
Thank you. Sure.
I just want to mention that when we talk about our work, that's a very vague term. And, people who have been engaged since the strategic designing process kind of know what that looks like and what staff have been working on doing over the last several years. But just the other day, Thursday night, we had the education committee meeting and we presented some updated discipline data from the middle high school that framed the school culture work that's been going on and the investments that staff have made there, as well as some PSAT and SAS preliminary data, sort of our pre-assessment for this school year, to kind of look at how things have gone from last spring when we did the summative tests to this fall and look at learning loss and things like that. And what we were able to present was some very positive news that because of the work that our teaching staff and our administrative staff and our counseling staff and associates have been doing, the discipline information in the middle high school is nearly 50% down in many, many categories. And overall, the numbers are about 2/3 of where they were at the same point last year, which is huge growth. We had said in the summer, we need to focus on some of those pieces coming out of COVID, and our teams have done that very successfully. And on the academic side, our fall pre-assessment data showed virtually zero loss of assessment points on the PSATs and SAS, and in some cases gains, even though it was only 2 or 3 weeks of instruction since we had started the school year. That's pretty remarkable. That means the durability of the learning that our teachers are doing in the classroom, the time they're spending working with each other, how they're engaging learners is effective. And it isn't just temporary learning in the spring that we're measuring and coming back and starting 20 points down in the fall. This was either at or above the levels that people ended with last year for learning. And that's pretty incredible and reflects the work that we're doing. So if we were to lose that momentum, to lose those staff positions, to lose the ability for kids to be connected to things in school, we go back to where we were 6 or 7 years ago, which is not a place I think we should be going. I think it would be very damaging to the learning process for learners.
Another significant aspect, as I think we've talked about quite a bit of our educational process, and it's a little bit of what Nikki said. Nikki said, we're teaching the whole child. We're not just taking the head off and saying, here, place it on desk, and it's like the Addams Family or something like that, you know. It's kind of funny picture. But we have the whole child, and I was just at a conference yesterday, and statewide efforts on DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And we have to go about things, I think, in our community, you know, you go slow to go fast, right? So we need to make sure that we're always understanding how the community feels about, you know, terminology and so forth. But one thing that out of that, that we understand is very important to make sure that we're improving our educational experience for all kids. And I think to help this community from a standpoint of culture as well as down the road economically, as long as we continue to improve ourselves here, is equity. People do not come always on the same playing field. Matter of fact, it's not usual, it's not typical. We have a history, I think, in most public schools or most schools where, you know, there are, whether it's financial or whether it's cultural or whether it's, you know, some sort of power difference occurs. And so it's not that we desire to take away any sort of power from anyone. That's not the case. But we would like to give other people the opportunity to be able to grow and also compete, and then bring all of our levels up, which is important. And so one of those areas is after school or outside of school activities, and making sure that they're quality, making sure that they're real experiences, not some sort of contrived experiences, and that they are accessible for everyone, and that if kids want to self-select out and try something different, that's fine. We want them to feel like as an example, for years, and we know this is the case. We even have data right now that says this is the case, because we don't even have a JV basketball team for the girls, the high school level. Cut, whether it be because of the names of the individuals who made the team, or whether it was because of their that they've been playing all along and they were already known entities, or what have you. Individuals who didn't make that cut for whatever purpose chose then not to continue. And as a result, we have that issue. That's not even the most significant of issues, of course, but it is an example of an impact when you do that. You know, we need to make certain that, again, the example of basketball, it's so key to the culture here. It's so important to the culture of these two towns. It's not something to say, oh, well, you know, let's just, you know, try to change that and get rid of that culture. No, we should build upon the strengths. We have strengths. That's something that we're proud of. But when individuals are not able to participate or take part of that, something that they know and the whole community knows is such a crucial part of the culture, these people are excluded. They are, and I'm talking large percentages of individuals are not included. And when they're not included, they are not taking part of the school system. They're not really able to grab hold of what they could have. And so we want to make sure that we're creating the equitable spaces. So I'll provide a little bit of time for Heather to say a few words, if she would.
Sure. I think this all comes down to, and when we talk about budgets and whatnot, every administrator just said it. What this budget is about is that every kid has potential. And if we don't provide the opportunity, then there's the problem. I've seen significant change in a lot of students. I know mostly because my office is in the middle school, but of kids that have taken on the responsibility of what they want to do academically because they've been told that they can also do something after school. And so many of the after school programs and clubs are driven by the students. There are students that have moved from middle school to the high school because and had success and come to school because they created actually the after school club. It's theirs because somebody said, you have this opportunity, you can do this. And I think that that's the biggest thing. So I cringe at the times that I have to watch principals scratch their head and say, how can I take this away? They did not put anything in this budget that's not needed for the students. And I think that that's firmly what everybody is talking about is we have done a great job. Our kids deserve that opportunity. They have the potential, but if we take away opportunities, then they don't. And I think that that's what has definitely come from some of the after school things. I can see it in parents and I can see it in their students. And I hear it all the time now that my son, my daughter has changed because they've had this opportunity. And it was an opportunity in their heads. I don't know if it was it's a cultural shift, but it was in their heads that they couldn't do it. And so when everybody is scratching their head and saying, what can we cut? You're taking away that potential for that student. And if it's one student, I don't think it is just one student. It has to be for everybody. And for those kids now to look up and say, hey, this can be me and I can do something different. I can try different things. And like Ruben said, self-select. Okay, I tried it, but I don't want to do it. David could make mention about the art program. If you walk around the school and the art program that they have and they're doing murals on walls, it is that look in their eyes that this is mine and I can do it. And somebody, it was the administration, gave them the opportunity and or their teachers to do these kind of things. And David is right. We also have a huge drive for success, for the arts, for baking, and all of those kind of things have come after school as well. And we just keep getting bigger and bigger. And the clubs keep getting bigger. I think if I look at the numbers, I think we're almost at 50% participation at the middle school for after school of kids participating. And I think that makes a huge difference. So again, I say about a budget, there's not one administrator or principal or anybody here that put anything in that budget that isn't needed because they believe that every kid has that potential.
And so thank you. And if anyone has any questions, you can, please feel free to ask the individuals who just spoke. The idea here is that for many years, I've come to the table with personnel cuts. If I feel like we have an efficiency issue or if we can do something different or whatever, we've done that. We've restructured through that process. Again, I do not believe at all it is in the best interests of this community as a town, people, for the future, because it would be short-sighted. There's too many examples of things being done in cheap and foolish ways over the course of history here, from facilities on to academics and educational decisions that have been short-sighted. Example, we talked about the drum that was underneath the ground as we try to put a ADA ramp in place that wasn't done properly, even though the drawing said it was done. Wires that hang, that were sawed off and not capped properly, things of that nature. Those are just like examples. There are other things. Our kids deserve us to fight for them. Our community deserves to have more of a conversation than just a tax rate. It's about building Jaffrey and Rindge, building the future of Jaffrey and Rindge, and giving our kids what they deserve. Now, I think that if we have a difference between the default, and we've had times where we've been able to go below default, These last 2 years, I think for very obvious reasons, around the world, we've brought in budgets that are a little higher than that. We certainly want to be budget conscious. I don't believe that we are asking for the world here. I think if we do end up having a difference between the default and a larger proposal, I think it's important that we get behind that and that we communicate that and that we really take pride in the fact that we're doing some good work here, some great work here, and that our kids deserve to be fought for. And if I felt we could reduce more, I would definitely put it out there. I don't pad things. There's no padding here. Now, there is a conversation. I said, this is the last thing I'll say, that we did have a conversation with the attorney about the unassigned fund balance. And his warning to us was, be careful about utilizing it. Because if you get into a situation where you have a default, for instance, next year, said you're not going to want to be in a position to do what was just talked about. It is limiting staff. You might have to use that next year. Now, my thinking is that there's a possibility with this number here that you'd be able to do that with a $480,000 or $439,000 difference, depending on whether you look at the general fund or the with food service and so forth. If you were to pre-buy some things right now, I think there's a good shot in knowing where our budget is, and Carrie can talk about this more. I think there's a good shot that you'll be able to still retain funds, over to the next year that will be close to what you currently have. There's always a possibility of something going in another direction, but and then have that amount to be able to handle it in case if we did have a default as well next year.
So Ruben, you mentioned that there was unfortunately some positions that you couldn't hire. Is that one of the factors that might allow us to still have the unassigned fund balance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Carrie,
so-
do you have those numbers? Just because it's a question that gets asked every year, so I'd rather just tell people.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oops.
Is this the projected unassigned fund balance for this fiscal year?
Yeah, so there are two things. One, currently we have 901 or a little over $900,000 in the unassigned fund balance. What Carrie is going to talk about is separate from that, but they are connected to each other. Yes, and you'll be able to ask that question once she provides her information.
So currently, right now, with staffing vacancies that we've had throughout the year and some that we still have vacant, we have about $665,000 that we could utilize for other reasons as a result of not having filled positions. However, there is about $420,000 that we still need this year. We need about $185,000 more to take care of facilities to get them through the year. Student services needs about $170,000, and we still need probably about another $65,000 in our fuel line. So that comes out to about another $420,000 that we still need to shift around to cover our needs.
So that if we were to spend, let's say, $200,000 or $300,000 from the unassigned fund balance, we'd have a hope of recouping much of that.
Yeah. Well, we should have it in this year's budget, right? It looks like that. And if the positions continue to remain unfilled, then we would continue to have more in the salaries and benefits
Okay.
as a result.
Yeah, that's as of now. It doesn't mean that we're, if we fill them, that number is still where it's at. If we don't fill them, that number increases.
Correct.
So, and this would be a good point, I think, for board members to end budget advisors to ask questions. Let's try and get as much information as we can. So Laurel, you. And then amendments.
I just have a question about page 10 of the presentation. If the board approves the pre-buy, that would reduce your proposed, the original proposed budget by $329,400. Is that right? And you're also proposing to reduce the original proposed budget by $486,679. That's eliminating the assistant principal for the elementaries and
Yes,
the 4, okay. So that's your proposed budget number 2 is reduced by 816,000 and change from your original,
yes.
okay. Then maybe my math is bad, but I get an adjusted proposed number 2 of 30,388,000, not 288,000.
You could be right.
What does that look like with revenue, the slide number 10?
Sorry, Laurel, could you just speak up just a little bit?
Sure, that with the proposed changes to the proposed budget,
Yeah.
so it's a lot of proposed.
Mhm.
You're reducing your original proposed budget by $816,000 and change. So doesn't your new proposed budget number 2 become 30,388,000? 139?
That is a with, revenue and without revenue.
Yeah, I'm looking at with revenue.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. I mean, I definitely could have not carried the 1. So let's see what we got. Joking, I didn't really, I used a calculator. 110,286. And so we take away that from the 31 million minus 31,204,218.
And maybe I can't run a calculator correctly.
I think you're right, but it's supposed to be a 3, not a 2.
Okay, so then our difference will be 580,000.
Mhm. But I don't believe that the general fund difference. Let me just see that again. Let me check it out.
And what is it that drives what appears on the warrant article?
Carrie, does the warrant article include the revenue and the?
You mean the food
sorry,
service and the
food
grants?
service and the.
Yes, the general fund, food service, and special revenue, which are the grants, and that might be where you get the revenue word from.
Yes, thank you.
Is there coffee over there?
We having a brief intermission? No.
Seven stretch.
Okay, so I'm a little bit lost on the clarification that Laurel just offered.
She's saying that should be $100,000 larger.
Okay, so instead of
30,288,000 should be 30,388, correct?
Yeah, I'm just. Okay, again.
Yeah.
I guess my next question would be, what is the board going to pre-buy?
Okay, so we'll get to that question, but another one, some other people, Lisa.
So I have a question for David. So take a drink, swallow, okay. Looking at slide 8. So my understanding is that this year in particular, due to us not purchasing through a cycle, the technology needed, that our testing was compromised. So first of all, just a quick question, and I know the answer to it, but has everybody in the district completed fall testing?
No.
Okay, can you please tell us specifically the effect not having enough of the correct and updated technology has had on testing, which is absolutely crucial to every aspect of what we're doing as a district? I know we're talking about kids, but the truth is everything falls on how we monitor testing. So, please speak to
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. I mean, so we ended the testing of 6th and 7th grade at about 60 learners each because it became a slog trying to catch up after that testing day had gone by. And just so anybody who's interested in hearing the tale on the testing date, because we didn't replace Chromebooks on a cycle and they do reach an end of life with Google, Google would not update the Chrome OS system on our 6th and 9th grade Chromebooks because they were at that point in time. We thought we would be okay to get through one more year with them because sometimes the New Hampshire Secure Browser does not update to require the most updated version of Chrome. Sometimes you get a little bit of leeway. However, the state did update the Secure Browser in October, and it cut off all of those Chromebooks from access to the Secure Browser. So IT was not aware of this. It did take us by surprise that day of the testing. It was kind of a nightmare. To be fair, the IT department had said there's a possibility this will happen, but we won't know until the state gives us the secure testing browser on the date of the testing. So it was a shock to the system a little bit. We had a lot of upset 6th graders in particular, which is, you'd think that they'd be excited to not have to do testing, but we had kind of prepared them for it. So then to have come into school that day and everyone's running around trying to figure this out on the fly, it was very disruptive to this entire school, but especially to those groups. We ended up not testing most of the 6th grade that day because they didn't have the devices. And on the other side of this, our desktop computers in the computer labs, which we attempted to fall back on, are also in many cases more than a decade old. We ended up only having a small number of those that can handle the secure testing browser. We haven't used it in a while on those devices because we have Chromebooks. So it was a bit of a nightmare. We had to prioritize the PSATs, which the district pays for, and that's where most of the devices that were working did end up going. So this caused weeks of trying to catch up the 6th and 7th graders. Again, we cut it off at about 60 individuals testing because that gives us, the large majority of learners having been tested, but it was extremely disruptive for sure. Which is all the more reason why I'm impressed with how the results came out, given the process of slogging to get there. But I would have preferred to have tested everybody at the same time and gotten the results from everybody to make sure that we're not missing the needs of any individual learner, which in the case of the 6th and 7th grade, I can't guarantee that because we did have to stop the testing eventually at about 60 to 65 kids.
So I have a carry-on question similar to it that
Yep.
can include the elementary as well, because I know they do the testing. So we now have access to iTutor, thanks to the DOE. And we've been utilizing VLAX as well as many other online services to educate the kids to supplement not being able to have, all the teaching staff that we want and not being able to teach all the courses that we want. So having an online community to teach is amazing. Does our technology support everything we need to do VLAX, iTutor, all of the things that we do?
So I would say that outside the world of testing, and I'll just speak for the middle high school and then turn the mic over to Nikki and Susan. We last year, using Durant Fund money, had purchased some Chromebooks for the school counseling office and the library, and thank goodness we did, because what's happening at this point is, as these very old 6th and 9th grader Chromebooks have died, broken, things like that, much higher numbers than they should have been because they should have gotten new ones this year. We have had those Chromebooks signed out almost every day from the library to support those learners whose Chromebooks aren't working. We don't obviously have enough. Ruben was able to pull some curriculum grant money together and buy some more to get us through this year, but it's still, what ends up happening is you go into a classroom and if somebody's accessing Otis, which is the online platform we're almost exclusively using, sometimes their devices so old and dated and broken, it doesn't load and they have to go borrow one and things like that. That being said, we're able to support the current needs barely, but another year without having that replacement cycle, definitely would not happen. The computer labs with the desktops, as we've increased some of the STEM programming, has also been an issue. You know, that again, they work. So I want to be clear, I'm not saying that we can't do what we're trying to do, but what I am saying is that regularly when a learner goes to sign into a desktop, it takes 10 minutes for the desktop to cycle up and sign that learner in because it is so old and the processor is so old. And IT has added memory to it to attempt to solve the problem over the years. They've done other things, changed out hard drives in some cases. They've tried solid state hard drives, but the issue is the processors are 10 years old. And in the world of computing, that's that's lifetimes of old technology. So that's another need that I didn't even ask for this year in terms of replacing. But when we are fully staffed in STEM and as we try to build those programs out, I will tell you that the current lab computers will not be sufficient for any of that work beyond the very basic stuff we're doing now.
So an update to that, while you're passing the microphone, is, yeah, at one point in time, we had conversations about, we have all these Chromebooks, maybe we don't need to have desktops and so forth. And so we held off on those, thinking that we would remove them and so forth. And we have removed quite a few desktops throughout the district, probably the majority of them. But we have found that obviously with the increase in STEM or STEAM type of work, that we need to have better devices, and they do need to be something other than a Chromebook. And so because this year, I mean, literally the courses can't be taught and curriculum can't happen. I was able to find some curriculum funds to be able to, well, it will be on the board agenda for this coming week to allow for a transfer to take place from curriculum to technology to be able to outfit one of those situations, those labs, to make sure that our kids have the speed of technology that they need.
It is, you can't really understate what happens. Again, we as adults, when our technology doesn't function, like my laptop, the little trackpad is getting ripped up now. It's getting to the end of its life, but I can make it work. I've got patience. I can do something else and figure it out. But when you're working with a learner who's in a classroom and everyone else has started doing their work, and we have purposefully put everything on the cloud for them and said, access it here. We're not going to buy textbooks. We're going to try to cut down on paper materials because we want you getting familiar with this. So then the teacher directs them, go on here and access this resource after the lesson we just did. And that learner opens their device and either the battery's dead, even though it was just plugged in. So now they have to go find a charger and stretch it to the wall, which is all the way over here, but the battery should have been fine. Or they go to cycle to that website and it's spinning, and their classmates are working. It's hard for a kid to recenter on the learning when they're trying to deal with that stuff that should not be a barrier to their learning. So I can't overstate what the question was that you asked, where I would again say we're kind of on the bitter edge of saying, if we can't maintain this cycle of technology, we will start not meeting more and more learner needs, and we'll have to start, to the point at the end of the slide, cycling back in time to some of those more traditional methods of instruction and learning, which I don't think prepare learners effectively for what's out there.
I think issues at the elementary school are similar. Our third graders were supposed to get new Chromebooks this year. So the devices they have are in pretty poor shape. And unlike the middle school, high school, we have not done as much testing of what's going to happen with state assessments, which we need to do very soon. But again, do we have enough replacements to fill in where things are going to be falling apart very soon? Certainly another year of no replacements would be very serious and concerning.
Thank you, Sue.
I think our short-term plan for state testing at the elementary level, after speaking with Mike Cotton for this year, we'll do our state testing in the spring, will be to access those devices that were part of the counseling department. So, you know,
Why not?
but that's both of our schools. So that's getting them from David. Sorry, your students won't have access to them for a couple of weeks while they're over at RMS, which means that JGS can't be testing at the same time as RMS because we need them in both places. And you know how it is to be in two places at once. And so yeah, we're already in a bit of a pickle with regards to looking forward to the spring. And like David said, I think that frustration of trying to work on a device that is not moving at the speed in which you are working, it's really easy to lose learners. It's really easy to for them to disengage, for them to get frustrated. And if we're asking them to do things that give them a comfortable challenge anyway, and then we lay on an additional challenge, the frustration can get too high, and then they withdraw from the learning task, and now we're looking at other things that we're having to deal with. And so we want to set the stage for them to be as successful as possible. And I think having some more appropriate technology in their hands would help us do that.
Everybody seems really soft. It's not, okay. I can't imagine how we're even going to do state testing. We have taken 3 weeks at least to complete it with every student having their own device. So if we are supposed to do it with how many borrowed devices? 70. Okay. It's going to be really challenging, and it's going to impact how we even administer the state assessment.
And just because you haven't heard from me yet, anticipate a 5 to 6 week now prolonged testing window, and students who require other supports and services, therapies, our district-wide therapists can't for 5 weeks provide things, because is this child testing? Are they not? Are they getting tested? Many of these kids take extended time to test. So now we're in legal hot water, because we're also not providing therapy because of this trickle down effect. So it's a snowball.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that we had a receptive audience on the technology and really the other things that you've talked about.
Well, and just to be clear and transparent, that 175 is Chromebooks and 8 to 10 wireless projectors.
Okay.
Is
thank
it-
you. I have a question for Nick. Is Charlie online with us?
And it's Chromebooks for this year and next year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I figured that was your question. Yep.
I was just wondering if Charlie is online with us, Charlie
Yes.
Iker. Okay, just want him to know that if he does have any input, please, to jump in. Not to put him on the spot.
I understand that, John. I'm just sitting here observing and listening right now. I missed a lot in the first meeting, so I'm trying to catch up.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Okay, and
So we've done a cost analysis on the computer, like why are we buying Chromebooks? I've never had luck with Chromebooks. It's a low quality piece of equipment that really has a short shelf life. Have we done a cost analysis to see if we get a little bit better of a product, if it lasts longer, or is there a reason why we go with Chromebooks just because they're cheap?
well, mine is a Chromebook and I haven't had that experience, but I'm gonna let David answer that because he's got more, the knowledge about this.
I'm glad you haven't had any issues with it though.
This one is going on 5 years old.
I mean, I have some knowledge, I think. I'm not an expert on the IT world, but I think two things have likely in the past led to that decision. One is that the school district moved firmly into the Google world. We don't, we used to once, back when we had desktops and things, we were in the Microsoft world. And so that was different, but now we're locked into the Google world. And so I think having a device that can be locked down into just accessing Chrome, accessing the Google suite of apps, requiring the Google sign-in, I think that was one part of the decision, because it is a lot easier for the safety of learners to lock down a Chromebook than a traditional laptop. I think the other piece is that we are still dealing with kids and their care of the devices is not always the best. So 3 or 4 years is usually about the amount of time before regular wear and tear of shoving it into a backpack, pulling it out, having books around it, bringing it home and leaving it on their desk or whatever. I mean, you see Chromebooks after 3 years and even this laptop would look the same way in a kid's hands. It's dinged, it's scratched, it's starting to show its wear and tear and really would need to be replaced anyway. So my guess, and I was not on the administration when the decision was made, but my guess is that it was likely we know we're going to be replacing these every 3 to 4 years. It's easier to be in the ecosystem that we're using. So let's get something that's durable enough, but low cost enough, so it isn't going to break the bank every time we have to replace it. And we do charge learners if they break their Chromebook inside the life cycle of the device, but it, it doesn't feel right doing that when you get to that time frame where it's expected to kind of be replaced anyway.
And then for the possible reductions that are on here, was Jen's proposal left open for the added staff to help hopefully bring some of these learners? Right, was that still left on there? That wasn't taken out, correct?
I think what we did was we left for the capacity for that to take place.
Okay.
I don't believe, as we were looking through it, that we found that $40,000 actually within the budget. So that's, we kept it in here. Like I said, we had the halftime pre-K that could easily shift to what you're just talking about. We reduced this SAU salaries to also consider that. We could possibly end up doing both depending on what people are hired at. We need to, do we find, I don't know, do we find another 10,000 out of, curriculum funds or something like that, or a grant to be able to do it? These are just numbers that allow us to play into it.
So I think that position's very important.
Or we take a look at some of our sublines and say, do we take 5,000 out of those to make sure that we can accommodate that? I didn't add another 40,000 into this, no.
I just think that's an important position, especially with the possibility of starting to bring some of these students back to the school. It's better for the student and it's better for the community. Because even right now, I don't know if we really even talked about it, where New Hampshire made it so the learners are there for an additional year. So like you said, that's an additional $1 million of cost. So no, I think it benefits us greatly to be able to bring the students back to the school district.
Right. So where are we now? Are there any other questions out there?
Laurel's subtraction was correct. So I just wanted to, make sure that, or addition, depending on the math.
I would challenge the board to authorize purchase of the Chromebooks for this year and next year today. And get them here so that you don't have these testing issues in the spring.
I'm also going to, and Carrie, please, along with that conversation, correct me if I misspeak, please. But my understanding is that, the reason why I would request utilizing the unassigned fund balance for this is not to say, oh, well, let's take it out of our existing funds right here. Because at some point in time, and we found this out last year, cash flow is really rough. So not diminishing our cash flow is equally as important. I'm not as concerned, like, do I think we have 175,000 this year's budget to do it? Yeah, I think we could probably go from this line, this line, this line, and this line and do it. All right. In the end, I believe that will all take place and go back to the unassigned fund balance anyway. But, or at least be close to that. The reason why I'm asking for that is because you have the capability of doing that, right? With one swoop, it comes from one location and it doesn't hurt the cash flow. Now, that takes trust that we're not just going to spend money and stuff, but we're pretty transparent with where the money goes. Any major ticket items is going to come before the board, or we're going to have to say, what's happening within our finance or facilities committees anyway. So there's a lot of oversight. If we didn't have the oversight, I actually would recommend not doing the unassigned fund balance and letting us deal with the cash flow, because I think that we need it to be transparent. But I think I think we have it.
John, on your list of the might help to buy now, the only ones that are critical to get out of the way early would be the two, the JGS and the RMS vestibules.
That's because of lead times.
Right,
Yeah,
so-
long lead times.
If we didn't approve the rest of those right now, what about the restroom stalls?
Those restroom stalls, there's some lead times, not as much, but there's lead time, but those things are dangerous.
All right, but the rest of the stuff on there with furnitures and all the carpet extractors, everything,
Yeah.
that's something that we could wait, kick the can down the road a little bit and then use the unassigned fund balance later if we needed to.
Somewhat. I mean, I wanted to just give you some input on
Mhm.
facilities overall. And I'll get to that too. But my focus in my concerns always are security and safety. That's what I focus on mainly. And first of all, to get to the proposed budget of that $1.4 million, I already shaved $368,000 just to get to that number. We have so many things in these facilities that are old. I get blindsided constantly. I mean, I don't know how many times I walk into Ruben's office furious because I get blindsided constantly. And I'll give you some examples of some blindsides that are safety blindsides that may continue until we can uncover them. We've had electrical panels, breakers being jumped by faulty wiring just to get more amperage from one breaker to the other, which is a no-no. We just uncovered, and you may not believe it, but it's true. We just uncovered aluminum foil being used as fuses.
That is my favorite.
I get blindsided constantly, people. I really do. And, you know, these facilities are old. They've been band-aided. We were replacing ramps at Ringe just recently because they were falling apart. And to put them back and replace them properly and correctly, you dig for footers. And we went down 4 feet to dig. What did we find? We uncovered a 1,000-gallon empty septic tank that was 8 feet under the hallway that eventually, not if, but when it would collapse. And guess what it would take with it? It'll take that hallway with it. So there's things that we get blindsided constantly in this district that I look at my repairs and maintenance lines, for instance. It still has a number to this $1.4 million proposed budget. It's still a number that goes back 2, 3 years, 4 years. And can I be specific on blindsides? No, because this district is so old and these buildings are so old and there's things that were done that were band-aided, which I refuse to do, that cost money to fix and to fix correctly. So, you know, you say on the equipment, you know, we have old equipment for the custodians. And by the way, the custodians have been doing double duty because we've been short like up to 40% of employees and they've been doing double duty. They wear out machines. We have a lot of carpets, too much carpeting. That's why I had carpeting there, but I took that away to get to this $1.4 million number. There should be tile. We're having pressure from the state now on certain chemicals, strippers that we're using on VCT tiles that aren't supposed to go down the drain. So there's all kinds of things that we're trying to adjust to. But all I'm saying is the budget that I have is so tight. And when we do get blindsided, we have to figure out, you know, I can't rob from Peter anymore because he's already been robbed. I'm robbing from Bob to pay Peter. So, you know, we're trying to do our best and I'm not trying to just paint a black picture, but you got to understand when it comes to facilities, these facilities, old facilities, you're constantly going to have problems, just constantly. Rusted out sprinkler pipes that caused the flood in September. It's just something's just always happening around the corner. So, you know, if you ask me for specifics when I sit down for some of these line items like repairs and maintenance, I can't give you specifics, but all I can tell you, another blindside is going to happen. And if we don't have some kind of funds in there to take care of it, we're going to have to take from somebody else or whatever to pay for that stuff. You know, the ramps, it was a $40,000 ramp situation, but again, to do it properly, we had to, and thank God we did, because if we hadn't gone down 4 feet and done this properly, we wouldn't have uncovered that abandoned tank that would eventually collapse, and who knows what would have happened in the hallway, because the hallway would have gone with it. So we're coming across motors that aren't wired properly because in the past we band-aided. So these are the things that we're trying to do correctly and do properly, and I will not, as long as I'm here, I won't band-aid anything. So I just want you to know the $1.4 million budget that I have proposed budget started at $1.8 million. So when I put something up there, it's because we need it. It's not fluff.
I do want to thank the community
Thank you, John.
again for passing the HVAC work. It can't be said enough because things are being done properly or will be. We'll make sure that they're done properly. It's providing infrastructure that is, modern and will be able to be utilized again. We're uncovering things through that process that we're able to help and fix as well. And we were able to do it in a far less expensive way than had we waited 3 months. By the tune of millions.
Well, you know what John has just spoken about. Is a reminder that in addition to deciding on our budget number and making some plans about spending going forward on Chromebooks and so forth, we also need to think about our warrant articles and what we're gonna try to put on the warrant. So I guess to the extent we want to make purchases from the unassigned fund balance, that means we need to schedule a public hearing. Do that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You need to schedule a public hearing to inform the voters of what you're spending the money on prior to the expenditure. So the board can make a decision to utilize the unassigned fund balance retention money. You just need to have a public hearing
So
prior to the purchase.
What's the have on that? In terms of when we post it versus when we get hold of it.
You just have to advertise at least 7 days prior in the paper.
All right, so that would push us to the first. Meeting in January then.
Mhm.
We won't get a meeting, or only other meeting for the year. That would be.
You get your bids and then have your hearing, right?
Well, the board can make a decision to spend the money. I would assume that John or Mike has already received the information with quotes of anything that we should be purchasing.
So just due to the holiday falling where it is, the first meeting that we could hold that public hearing would be January 9th. Just because we push it back a week because of how everything falls holiday wise. So.
okay,
What's the lead time on laptops? Do they normally come in pretty quick when you order them?
You mean the Chromebooks?
Yeah.
They did last time when I got them. They were within a week they were here. Yeah, I mean, it depends who has what in stock, right? And at that point in time, they had over 1,000 in stock so we were able to get what we needed.
okay, so
I mean, it then takes time to set them all up, but
Yeah.
But getting them here is not as hard.
Yeah, I just remember when talking with Mike, when we first had that acquisition, he said that a lot of it depends on available stock and that they can have fluctuations where they have an overstock and they have an overabundance of stuff that they can easily get out. Sometimes that, number goes down and then it can be a little bit harder. But he said that, as Ruben said, based on the timing right now, things were available the last time.
okay, so we're at 11:25. Would anyone like to take 10 minutes? So why don't we do that?
Can you tell us what we have next, coming up next, so we prepare?
So we know what we have to go through.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess we have to decide on a budget number on the presentation that Ruben has made, what it is we want to support as a board. Sounds like we need to schedule this public hearing or decide if we want to schedule that public hearing to look at use of the unassigned fund balance for the technology purchase and the other items we've just discussed. And what else?
we typically have some conversations around warrant articles. It's not essential that we finalize them, but to get wording and so forth, correct, we usually like to have the topics of what we're doing for warrant articles.
Well, I'll need to put the public notices together, so that
Mhm.
if we're not going to have another budget meeting after this. You have to finish today. That would be the amounts.
Well, I mean, for instance, one of the warrant articles would be a potential JRSSA one, where the numbers wouldn't be known. Right now,
Negotiations.
Yeah,
Okay, that's true. Actually, in the public notices, I don't need to help.
Yeah.
But we could still have the rest scoped out.
But the other ones, like student services or facilities or what have you.
Okay, Lisa,
I feel strongly that before we take a break, I feel that the two proposals that were brought forward do need to be separate. I don't feel like we should be looking at those together. We've been discussing this, page 8, for a couple of weeks now and looking at it, and I would like to propose that the board approves spending from the unassigned fund balance no greater an amount than $329,400 for the purpose of purchasing the technology, the facilities work, and the furniture outlined specifically on this note. I guess I'd like this piece done before we break so that we can come back fresh and look at the next things,
okay, thank you, Lisa.
Something we need to vote on.
She made a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Hello? Yes,
Yep.
I believe the procedure is that you go to a public hearing, you present the case, you ask for public input, and at that time, the board takes a vote and makes a decision. If you're making a decision right now, it's not a public hearing, and you don't have public input. So I believe the law requires you to have a public hearing, at which time you take input from the public.
And
thank you, Charlie. And I think that that's right. What we would do today is to decide to hold that public hearing.
all right, so I thought it was that we say this is our intent. Now let's hold a public hearing to get input. So, okay, that's,
No, you're right, John and Lisa. We can vote to hold a public hearing because it's our intent to do that, but we can't take a vote to do that.
Okay. And so why don't we act on the decision to hold a public hearing to make use of the unassigned fund balance?
yep. So I'll modify my motion to hold a public hearing to consider removing the funds from the unassigned funds.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And Christine, your second is,
I still second that.
okay. So let's do a roll call vote on that. Charlie,
Aye.
Daisy, Christine,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
and I vote aye also. Okay,
6-0.
so 6-0. Okay, so why don't we take 10 minutes now? And we'll come back and finalize our budget discussion and then we'll go on to the warrant articles. And try and wrap this up.
Is there a
quickly as
stash
possible.
of waters around? The water vending machine was blocked by tables. Is there?
The one out there?
Yeah. The vending machine was blocked, so I couldn't get in.
We have cups and we have the water bottle filling station.
Just use the free teacher credit. Whole school.
So in the interest of moving us forward and getting ourselves out of here at a reasonable hour, let's move on to our budget proposal for the coming year. And then we'll move on to our warrant articles. So we've had a presentation from Ruben. We have heard from our principals and our directors. Are there any discussions about the budget proposal we want to make to our community? this year?
What is the price difference per thousand for the taxpayer from the proposed to the adjusted proposed? In relevance to the defaults, like how much more is it than the default budget?
That's a great question. Carrie, that
Yeah, I see that.
So the proposed number, the adjusted proposed number 2,
Yeah, so.
if you can throw that last slide on, it should with a, I've changed it on my slides, but it's not gonna be changed on the PDF. Should be 30,388,139, and that's
which slide is that, Ruben?
that's the final slide, and it should say with food service and other special revenues, not just with revenue. But it doesn't say that.
May I ask a question?
Hmm.
Did, was there any review of revenues to see if there's any opportunity there to project any increases, for example, for now just Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicaid. I'll Carrie about I'll let her do this first.
Sure.
And then we'll talk about the revenue matter.
So the amount that the new proposed would be over the new default amount would be a difference of an additional 53 cents for Jaffrey and an additional 70 cents for Ridge.
70.
70. It should be
Say that again.
$2.12 for Jaffrey, $2.28 for Ridge for the new proposed, and the default amounts. Would be 16. Sorry. $1.58 for Jaffrey and $1.87 for Ridge. That's the increase in the default.
And could you repeat the new proposed, please?
These are estimated.
Yep.
Right, so now,
212 for Jaffrey, 228 for Ridge. And the difference over default should be 53 cents additional for Jaffrey and 70 cents additional.
so Carrie, you're saying that the difference for Jaffrey,
So you
just based on the default, would be $1.58, and for Ridge, $1.78,
$1.87.
$1.87. And
Those
then,
would be the increases, the estimated increases, yeah. Over this
Estimated,
year's tax
right.
rate.
and then the proposed would add an additional 53 cents for Jaffrey and additional 70 for Ridge.
70 cents doesn't.
7, right? So it would be 212 and 228 respectively.
So the difference of over default for Ridge is like 42 cents. From 187 to 228.
Was like $1. I don't know. We'll have to ask the original proposed was. I have it in another slide, actually. Don't I? Oh, no, I don't, because I included the swept. That's not hard. It's an easier sway. Isn't, well, yeah. We'll ask. Much higher. Why? Mhm. When the dollars start to have significant impact, it's like, okay, here, like there's moderate exact, at this spot. Once you get this, then every dollar.
So Paul, do you have that
41.
information? Well,
41 cents.
I also asked,
Yeah.
the original proposed was. What the difference, what the actual one was for that.
And I think the reason,
Today or?
The original, like, the non-adjusted
time, yeah.
proposed.
Okay.
Just so we can wrap our heads around. What the taxpayer is gonna see, and I think that'll have an impact on.
well, and to your point, I think it might help you with some decision making here to see where we came from. Again, the original, what was in the original. It's the stuff that we just talked about. Purchasing perhaps ahead of time and some of those roles. So an assistant principal at the elementary school is needed. Some of these other roles are needed. Some of these purchases can be pushed for another year, or, maybe we were able to find something, toward the end of the year, or with some smaller purchases, but nonetheless, removing some of that can get us to a spot that doesn't damage our forward momentum. But I would say that that's the limit of what's going to damage, not cause the damage. It keeps us kind of in the same trajectory of where we're going. So the original number, it was the high number. I don't know if you have that. I have it from another.
Dollar amounts for the taxpayers. This is the
Yeah.
increase.
What I wrote down was, if this is correct, from our last meeting, was that proposed would have been for Ringe, $3.42, and Jaffrey would have been $3.45. And that default would have been $2.06, and Jaffrey would have been $1.72. Those numbers.
Why would
sound correct.
default go down?
Yeah, I don't know.
Default went down?
The $3, I think, came when you included the
Yeah,
swept, the
yeah.
statewide
Okay.
education.
Yep, so that was
So it's not quite as high when you're just looking at what was on the warrant article.
So then those numbers would have been 286 for Ringe, 286 for Jaffrey, because that was unusual that they were the same. And
You
for
did say
the
they were
default,
the same.
$1.49 for Ringe and $1.09 for Jaffrey.
That was the original default too.
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
That was the original default. So that's from the last meeting.
So it decreased.
But-
From the original proposed to the modified proposed, it looks like an estimated 60 cent. Tax reduction per thousand for Ringe, and an estimated 74 cents.
Yeah.
Tax reduction for Jaffrey. From proposed. So,
Now you're in the full dollar range difference from default to
mhm.
proposed.
And that was a full dollar range right from default to proposed. Yeah, so you're talking like a 40 cent change difference between default and proposed number two,
The dollars.
and a 45 cent one for Jaffrey and 40 cents for Ringe, the difference.
And that's without taking away anything from the unassigned fund balance. So we can still, in theory, if you want to subtract that, we kind of split the difference, but.
I don't know what you just,
So this number right here, the original proposed doesn't account for us using unassigned fund balance.
that is correct.
So if we were to take that 300, it would kind of split the difference and drop that. A little bit lower.
Well, except that we're gonna propose this budget. Based on the concept that we'll be able to afford it because we'll use
Right.
some of it. assigned.
Right.
So.
Well, that's at least my proposal, yes.
Right. So based on the presentation and on the information that we've just gotten, which is not finalized yet because there's still some information to come from the states. Finalizing the Department of Revenue Administration has to do. All right.
No,
Okay,
I'm not sure what they would have to, what you're referring to.
I think you said that the numbers aren't finalized yet.
So the revenues have been finalized for this year. So they've been finalized, yeah, for this year's taxes. The revenue, if you're talking about revenue, would not be finalized until next fall for next year. So what we estimate for revenues now is just an estimate.
And what we're estimating for revenues right now, along with what Laurel was asking, did we estimate more coming to us in revenue, the same, less?
I did not estimate more coming to us. Some monies were less based on information that I do know.
Mhm.
But there weren't increases in revenues.
Was there an increase in, say, for instance, Medicaid, but a decrease in another pocket to,
That was this year, not next year.
that was this year, got it, yep.
So then the revenue numbers that we have are estimated, but they'll be finalized in the fall.
In the fall, right, so any adjustments to that would adjust the tax rates when they're finalized next year. So the revenues for the purpose of estimating here are to help estimate what the tax impact will be next year. That goes on the warrant article.
Okay, so these are the numbers we will have in March at the time of vote.
Well,
These
they,
revenue
right,
numbers.
yes, yes,
Okay,
Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, Carrie, would you say that all the numbers I put up on the screen are correct in terms of estimated rates? Keeping in mind that, again, the default on the top, the proposed on the top is based on the proposed number from Monday's meeting. And then that second, fourth line are based on what's proposed today.
Could you make that bigger? by any chance? Sorry.
yes, those are correct, okay. Yeah.
If default passes, it's 108 for Jeffrey?
No,
Oh, from last Monday, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just to give you guys the comparison
Yeah.
between what we were looking at Monday.
would you
to
be
today.
willing to highlight the current ones, the in yellow that just
Yeah, I just gotta pull it back on my screen.
the same dates is kind of the idea, is what I'm trying to think, so that they can compare.
I'm not sure it would be helpful to highlight a change in default.
No, what I mean
Going
by,
forward.
what I'm trying to say is just for this purpose right here. Just to show that the difference between the 12.5 and the 12.10, just so that you can make the good decisions and not be confused. I agree entirely.
There's only one default.
Yeah, there's one default. That prior one is, was based on old knowledge.
Sorry. I just want to point out that the argument for reducing the assistant principal is based on its minority or not. And also that would be an argument for increasing student services personnel is based partially on their need to support elementary. So we're adding someone to solve a problem that's being created by an issue that we have with not having enough administrative support in elementary school.
Test.
I don't know what your tax rate was last year, but yeah. Probably.
Can again, I know we're trying to clarify the numbers here. So the very bottom, if proposed passes 12-10 numbers, is that based on both suggested reductions?
The 1210, the bottom one you highlighted,
Yep.
that's based on both suggested, yes.
Okay. Can we have a conversation about
And for
the,
consideration. What would it be, just because it was brought up, what would it be if we put 135 back in for the assistant principal?
I'm sorry.
What would it be if we added 135 to the proposed? I don't think it would change default, right?
224 for Jaffrey and additional 237 for Ridge.
So 12 cents per thousand is for each town, or 13 cents per, per
It's
thousand.
18 for Jeffrey and 14 for Ridge.
Hang on, I'm sorry. Hold on a minute. $224 and $237. Is that what I said?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
224 and 237. Okay, so it's a little more for a ring.
well, it's
could I
it's
ask,
less, it's
Less,
9
less.
cents, 9 cents for Ringe.
Yep.
And 12 cents for Jaffrey.
Okay.
And it could make a huge difference.
could I ask that we take a look at slide number 6, please, with the possible reductions and discuss that? Discuss those.
Yep.
I know we're taking one thing out, but if we could just go back to number 6 and look at the whole thing. I personally, if we can just have a discussion on it, I'll just talk. I personally am not comfortable with this size of the reduction and for what they're for. I would agree that the increased permanent subs for the 168,785, I would be okay with taking that out for now. And the smaller facility lines, maybe those are put already in to the other things, John. I don't know, that 45,000 at the bottom there. Was that part of the furniture in the other proposed? This is a different one. Okay, yeah, I don't want to touch. Personally, the only thing I'd be comfortable taking out of this would be the 168,785. Everything else, I'm not seeing that those are as negotiable to me. I think that these are very reasonable requests that we can handle the increase. I guess I'm not comfortable nickel and diming quite there, but let's have a discussion.
I would say my 44.3 is negotiable. I can give that up to get other
Okay,
pieces and figure out how to get the things I need now and keep asking for them to grow later.
so that would
So
be
that
about
add that to your 168.
Okay, so that would bring that down by about 200,000 for those two lines. Could we be okay with 286,000, 287,000? Keeping the others?
You're pretty, Jen, are you pretty passionate about the pre-K OOD ones? Do you think that's very important, or would you say that's important?
If we want to keep staff that we have, it's now, or it's the same conversation we're having. It's
Right.
now, it's later, it's long-term, it's short-term. I think I don't disagree with the elementary principals as well. Part of this is that pre-K coordination, although that's not really supports and services, that still falls within special ed. Can this wait another year? Potentially, can we lose staff because it's so overwhelming right now and not in any way be able to replace them? Equally potential.
As we've increased our preschools, as we've doubled our preschools, we need to make sure that we're supporting them. The infrastructure is very, very crucial to be able to sustain that. And that whole point of doing it was that it wasn't going to be a one-year thing. We need to make something that is sustainable, because this is what's going to feed our increase to build our capacity in the school broadly. Like, yes, we've dropped a lot of students. This is where the community has said, we will support this. We want to make sure that we are creating that infrastructure and supporting that infrastructure to keep those. I think 65,000 is a very small ask to support doubling our preschools.
So we currently have these subs, correct? Is it, you're just increasing the permanent subs from the 168 to the 228?
I think what this is saying is we had originally proposed to hire 4 permanent subs. And instead we will put more money in the pool for day subs.
We just increased the amounts for subs, for instance.
Right.
You know, maybe that will pan out for us. And so the idea of, I mean, I didn't want to give back all 228 because we have to budget an increase for that. So I threw an estimated 15,000 per school at that spot. This is not eliminating the ones we currently have.
Right.
It's eliminating the increase. I saw that, you know.
Can I just make one comment about that also? I do just want to point out that even though this says, you know, saving 168,785 or whatever that figure ends up being, every time that we have a teacher subbing into a classroom because we don't have a sub, it costs us $40 an hour currently for that teacher to do that. So in this building, it's consistently on average at least 2 to 3 hours a day of teacher coverage for each other, which is costing $80 to $120 a day. That's on the average. That means there are many days that it's substantially higher than that. And we have classes that we can't always cover that end up in the CAF or things like that. So there is a different cost. I understand taking these out saves a top line right now. You can take it off the budget and say, hey, we're saving this. But the reality is we will be paying teachers on the other end, not $19 an hour, which is what the permanent subs make, but $40 an hour, which is the teacher rate in their contract to cover those same classes. And there's a knock-on effect when teachers do that, which is that they're giving up their preparation time to do that, which is why they're getting paid. But it does drain a teacher when every day they're covering, which we have the same batch of teachers who cover every single day. You know, that has a whole other ripple effect. So I'm not saying keep it in or leave it out. I'm just saying that's something to consider. It does have a bigger impact than what this shows. And there is a different cost that shows up in other salary lines when teachers are covering instead of having these types of subs.
Thank you, Dave. So. What's the pleasure of the board and the advisors? Lisa's made a good point. On the other hand, we want to be able to sell this to our community. So it's important, along with the warrant articles that are still to be discussed. Unfortunately, we don't have an HVAC project this year.
I think the issue is with the original proposal, without taking anything out of it, the difference between the default budget and the proposed budget is about $1 per thousand for Ringe and $1 and some change for Jaffrey. I think it's a harder sell once you get to that full dollar range. I think if we can get it below that, it's a people might be more willing to pass the what we're asking. Just, I don't know. So I feel like if we ask for everything, we get nothing. Well, that's not good. So if we ask for a little bit less than everything, we get it. It's a little better, you know what I mean?
That's the dilemma, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Exactly it.
It is interesting. We really have hit that spot where we're asking what we need,
Right.
and there isn't anything else to take at this point in time. Not without damage.
May I ask if is there any amount being proposed for the Building Maintenance Reserve Trust Fund? Do you have a dollar figure that you're gonna have on a warrant article? Do you have an idea?
We have not had substantive discussions about it. However, I do think that John has a number in mind. And I think it's an appropriate question, Laurel, because at at this point, once we set our budget number, we have to sell that, make sure the community understands what it is we're asking for, what the choices are. But at the same time, we're gonna have these warrant articles out there for JRSSA, for student services, for building maintenance and building emergencies. So it's a whole package, and if we pass the budget but don't pass those warrant articles, that's equally destructive.
Yeah.
Can I ask, how do we, while you're doing that, how can we set a number tonight if we have to wait for the hearing to know if we're gonna use that 300 plus thousand? How do we set a number?
You're gonna take public input, but you can decide at the hearing.
Yeah, Carrie, do you have the law on
But if
what?
we can't
the-
know, but if
I
we didn't know
mean-
if we're all doing it.
Well, you know,
Pardon me?
I'm
But we
gonna,
can't
I'm gonna
vote on
ask
it to know if we're all doing
Charlie
it.
to weigh in on that.
Just assuming we are, like that, so.
I think there's two different decisions. I think we have to make a budget decision. Assuming what we will about the public hearing and that other decision, but regardless of what happens with that. That's and I'll mention Charlie's name again, because if you're out there, Charlie, and have been put on this, please do chime in.
Yeah, I'm out here.
Thank you for hanging in there with us.
So what was the question again?
How are we supposed to determine what our proposed budget is if we don't have a definite answer on the unassigned funds that we're going to be using? Because if we can't have that hearing until January 9th, then we don't know what we're working with for a budget until January 9th.
I think what we need to decide is what is our proposed budget? Our default's already been decided. And you could have to decide the proposed budget based on the information that you have today and what you want to move forward with. So the use of the retained funds is only going to allow us to buy things this year instead of, and take them out of the budget for next year. Now, it's my understanding that these were already earmarked as items that could be removed. So the alternative is they're removed, or they're removed and paid for with retained funds. They should have no impact on the proposed budget for next year.
Yeah, so no. If we could go to the slide, unless I misunderstood what was just said. We go not to the possible reductions, but the, hey, let's look at what we can do if we buy slide.
It's number 8.
Yeah. So these items right here, we didn't indicate were things that we didn't need.
They're needed.
If they didn't need them, I would have cut them from the budget. Like they would be gone. We wouldn't even be talking about them here. And that technology, that is a must. We cannot. I mean, obviously, I put them in a priority order, is what I did. So the technology, then the facilities, and then the furnitures and so forth. There's a few items within each of those schools that probably would go up a little bit of a higher priority, but the technology being the most important out of those. So all of these were there in the budget. All of these things were things that, yes, we need to have. There was nothing proposed that we didn't need. But this is a way to get those and remove them from the budget in order to move forward. So I do think you have, like Charlie said, you budget with the information you know and with the intentions that the board has.
Nick?
Charlie can certainly correct if I'm wrong. I think the point he was trying to bring up is if you don't have the unassigned fund balance, you could try to use retained funds from this year's budget to try to pay off these same items. So not necessarily not pay for them, but just try to use a different pot, so to speak.
Is,
Yep, okay,
Your-
that's that, okay.
is your budget hearing on January 12th? Or do I have a bad date?
That sounds right.
Okay, and you're having a public hearing on the 9th about expenditure from the unassigned fund balance. If for some reason the board decides not to expend from the unassigned fund balance, you can change your budget amount for the hearing then.
I presume we can change it on the 12th in any case, based on input from the public, including from the board.
Yeah, that is true. Again, if Nick, what you just interpreted was the case. I don't know if that's what Charlie meant, but if that is what he meant, then what they were saying was like, if you feel that these things can be purchased, then we're gonna go and assume that these things are gonna be purchased this year. Now, whether it's the unassigned fund balance or whether it's at, at another pot of money or whatever like that, that might be there. The board saying these things should be purchased this year.
Did I summarize your point correctly, Charlie?
I was concerned about the retained funds, okay, from last year. We have 914K in there, I believe, and those can be used with public hearing. And I think those can be used for things to prepay technology or to purchase other items, right? And that does not require us, that would impact the proposed budget as opposed to the other side, which I don't see that impacting the proposed budget. In other words, if we decide that we're going to prepay technology, that's 175,000 that we need in the proposed budget that we can remove from the proposed budget because it will be paid for this year.
wherever we pay it from.
And just to confirm, Laurel's date was correct on the budget hearing. So we'll have that board meeting on Monday where we'd have the public hearing, and then the Thursday of that week would be the budget hearing.
Okay, so the question before us is, what's our budget number gonna be? And Lisa's expressed concern about the number of reductions. At some point, we need to have a motion on what our proposed budget is gonna be.
Could I request, if nobody's, I don't wanna. Okay, all right. Could I request an updated number, Carrie, of the proposed budget minus the buy now items total and subtracting from the possible reductions only the increased permanent subs of 168,785 and the variety of smaller student services lines of 44,300. Only those two.
So the 329,400.
Yep.
168,785.
Yep.
And 44,300.
Yep.
I have $2.34 for Jaffrey, $2.45 for Ringe.
234.
234 and 245. So it would be a difference of 76 over default and 58 cents over default respectively, the towns.
And what would the total number be, like the entire proposed budget number be?
I have 30,661,733.
And that's the difference from the default of.
$854,480.
So 854,000 versus 439,730. Okay, so I think the case that Lisa makes, I know, I support those expenditures. But at the same time, and I think this has been expressed well by others, the the concern is, can we get people to vote for it? And how much of an effort will that take? What kind of an impact would it have on our warrant articles? So what do you think, folks?
It's so difficult. It's impossible to know what people will vote for. I mean, I was not prepared for Jaffrey to vote against the proposed budget last year. That was punch to the gut. And thank you to the middle school and high school for completely rearranging their structure to make it possible for us to survive under default. We know the impact that running under default would have this year. We talk about things like teachers not wanting to apply. So we talk about possible risk to accreditation. It's really scary. The idea that we would propose a number that voters would not accept. But I don't know how to know what's an acceptable number. I listening through the finance meetings, through the budget review meetings, I remember Susan talking about how, when you add up the administrators in the grade schools and you compared it to the administrators in the middle school and the high school, you would see that the grade schools actually have fewer administrators, but about the same number of students. And we see so many behavior concerns happening at the grade school now, and it really speaks to the need for that extra assistant principal, full-time assistant principal to have one in each school. It's definitely a concern that can be well addressed by having that staff person there. I just don't know how to take a guess. But as far as I can see, what people will support, what Jaffrey will support.
I mean, all of our prices have gone up, gas, everything.
Mhm.
Every single voter's prices also went up. Inflation hit them too, so. It's hard for me to think that a lot of people are gonna just be willing to shell out more money willingly, you know?
Well, we definitely have to educate people to understand what's behind the numbers, because when they vote, what they're gonna see is the numbers, and they're not gonna see the projects and the people that those numbers represent. And it really, we have to go above and beyond what we say at the deliberative session. We really need to create a campaign to explain what is in our proposed budget and why it's so important.
Agreed. Thank you for those who have spoken so far. I don't know if our budget advisors or other board members have anything else to add. I think we all understand the dilemma. It's just a question of how do we address it?
Similar to last year, you're in a very difficult position. Default versus proposed. It's hard for me to make any suggestions without knowing what other warrant articles you're putting forward. To look at it as a totality.
Yeah, that's fair also. Well, sounds like this is something we need to do sort of all together to some extent. I think our major warrant articles will revolve around student services fund and the facilities department. I don't know if you
And a possible JRSA.
and JRSSA, exactly. So why don't we speak about rough numbers here?
Okay, why don't we, what's $100,000 gonna do if we just use that and then kind of just multiply it? $100,000 due on the tax rate in either town.
18 for Jaffrey and 14 for Ringe.
Give me a few minutes.
Sure.
Got you.
Ruben,
Yes,
the average tax bill evaluation in range is approximately 250K. So if you take your 250 times the increase in the tax rate, that'll tell you the dollar amount that's going to increase. And I think that's what a lot of people look at. They don't necessarily look at the rate, but they look at the rate combined with their assessment to determine how much it's going to cost them. So in some cases, like a 17 cents increase, going from one proposal to another, actually turns out to be about $42 on a, 250K house. So you need to look at it, at least some people look at it from that perspective.
From the dollar perspective.
That's correct.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking, because typically when we talk about the 100,000, I'm not talking about $100,000 home. I'm talking about like, what if we add like have a warrant article for $100,000? Like, let's say JRSSA is $150,000 for the first year, or $200,000 for the first year, or whatever that might be, right? So the 100 will give us a nice baseline, because then we don't usually talk about anything
Right.
too terribly less than that for facilities. And then, of course, the possibility of special education. Often we take that out of remaining funds, as opposed to asking for further raising and appropriating, but regardless, just to have this so that we can quickly take that and then multiply by the 250,000 to get the dollar amount, what that means as well.
While we're waiting, John, would you like to talk a little bit to your facilities needs?
You were talking about warrants, right?
Yes.
Well, we know we have depleted the trust fund now, so I'm really starting from a zero. Okay. And I know last year when we looked at the warrants, we had some high ticket items, which we still have, like windows and doors and so forth, that we're trying to build the trust fund up to take care of those high ticket items. And I think we were looking for 500 last year. I think we got 300. And we used the 300 up between the air quality system and the wood shop and the ramp. So that's why it was back down to zero. Last
And there were
year,
there were a few doors.
yeah,
Yes.
right. We did a couple of doors. That was like $28,000. So that's what depleted the trust fund. Last year, about this time, I did some quotes on the windows and doors, and that's about $1.1 million for those windows and doors for the district. Now, not to be done right away, but to try and chip away as we go the next 2-3 years. And that was last year's prices. And keep in mind, those prices have gone up over 20% to date. So you may be talking $1.3 million. Take away the $100,000 from that, which is the 20,000 we already did, and the 70,000 I had in there as a pre-buy. It still brings it back to about $1.2 million. Whatever numbers we can put into the trust fund to start building it up to take care of those high ticket items, because I don't think they're going to pass through the operating budget. And I'd also would recommend, whether it's one warrant or two warrants, one for those high ticket items and one for, call it an emergency fund, whatever you want to call it, for these blind sides that I keep getting that the operating budget lines can't take care of. Because there's no way of knowing what those blind sides are, but we know they add up to thousands of dollars every time we have a blind side. And believe me, we're going to continue having some because of the age of facilities. So as far as a dollar amount yet, I haven't discussed it with the facility committee, but these are the things that I'm thinking of. Is we got to take care of windows and doors. They're not going to go away. The buildings are not getting younger. And we have some pretty pathetic windows out there in some of the schools, not so much the middle school, because we took care of them in 2007, but all the other schools, they're pretty old, inefficient, heat loss, you name it. They're just bad. And there's still a lot of doors, because the only doors I addressed on that pre-buy was the one vestibule at Ringe and the one vestibule at JGS. But there's a lot of exterior doors that decrepit, rusting, just no good. So if you want a number, I'm not sure what I'll tell you. I just know it's $1.1 million in windows and doors to replace them eventually. And some kind of an emergency fund for all these emergencies that we are having that the operating budget just can't predict.
So would that be two different warrant articles? One, do we have an emergency fund for the facility? Would just be one?
We won't have an emergency fund, I don't believe.
It's just building maintenance.
Yeah.
I just mentioned it in case you wanted to separate it, but whatever.
So for on 100,000, it would be a 9 cent increase for Jackman, a 7 cent increase for Lynch.
So,
Sorry. Eric, could you give me those ones more, please? 9 and
97.
97. Thank you.
So you're asking to put a warrant on for 1,000,002?
I'm not saying to put the whole thing in. I'm just saying we need something to build up to eventually do the windows. We don't have to do all the windows and doors all at once. But I know that's the cost of last year's prices to do the windows which need to be replaced. Not tomorrow, but eventually because they're pretty old and pretty decrepit. And that's why last year we were thinking of, let's start the fund at 500,000. I know it ended up at 300, but to try and build dollars into that fund to be able to take care of that. And on another note, side note, I'm not saying one way or the other, but we know that the Jaffrey Grade School parking lot is pretty pathetic. And we already know that's around $1 million to do. I'm just bringing it up that won't go away either.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think
Is-
we're
is there,
cognizant that has to be done, well, this is probably half the year. So if we were to do just a building maintenance trust fund, not a second warrant. What can we put in there that's gonna get you through the year and allow you to make enough progress that you'll feel okay?
I can't predict the emergencies, obviously. I mean, if you want to slap a number on it, I'm gonna call it $50,000 to have in there as some kind of a emergency fund to draw from, because I know that the 25 per school that I have for repairs and maintenance isn't going to cover repairs and maintenance for the schools and emergencies. I mean, that'd be the minimum I'd say to have in there. As far as the windows and doors, you know, I mean, I have the detail by school, keep in mind they're year-old numbers. And we're talking about Ringe, for instance, for windows, again, keep in mind it's last year's numbers. That was about $190,000 just for the windows. For Ringe, it was about $257,000 for JGS for all their windows. The doors for the high school was around 46 grand. For the middle school was around 180,000, grade school 119, and Ringe 210. And that's to replace all the exterior doors that are just aging and a lot of them rusting. So again, I'm looking at that over time, you know, we can still,
Right.
I would probably do windows sooner than later because you're losing a lot of efficiency, a lot of heat, a lot of, you know, that can help you out quicker than the doors as far as energy goes. But we do have to address some doors. If you look at some of these doors around here, you'll see a lot of rust, a lot of the frames rusting out, a lot of the doors rusting out. In summertime, some of these metal doors, which I would replace with aluminum, they expand and we have problems with setting the alarms because the contacts get out of whack. That's how much they shift. So
So if we did a warrant article for the building maintenance trust fund for $500,000.
that'd be a good start. That'd be a good start.
but it,
I think max you'd want 400, 'cause you just said you could do it over a 3-year cycle, 1.2.
Yeah, and that's today's dollars.
so you're talking about windows and doors only. But there are other needs,
Yeah, the parking lot.
parking lot,
Mhm.
Jaffrey Grade School,
Mhm.
whatever facade issues you have in all your mortar and brick buildings.
Mhm. Some
Maintaining the
masonry.
woods around your septic fields and range.
Oh, yeah, there's a,
The drainage issues you have with the fields here,
Mm.
that if you don't repair your drainage soon, someone's gonna come by and classify it a wetland, and then you're never gonna be able to reclaim it. Is there any way for the facilities committee and the board and the community to focus on the overall needs of the school and put together a package for a bond for next year, and you've got the quotes and you know how much it's gonna cost?
It's a good idea. Good idea.
I mean, it would be a big lift, but I think that it gives you the time to sell it to the community. You know, we didn't get the new school, so this is the price we gotta pay, and this is the work that needs to be done. You need a floor at JGS in the gym, right?
and soon,
And
Pratt.
soon.
and the Pratt soon.
Yeah, and if, do you really want to replace the floor in the Pratt, or do you want a new Pratt?
Mm-hmm.
Have to call it Pratt. I don't know, who was Pratt? Does anyone know the history of that name? That's sad, isn't it? Someone must have given money. I would suggest you put $250,000 in your emergency fund and try to prepare for a big community education and sell for next year. And have a clerk of the works that oversees it in support of John.
I was trying to go back into and seeing what passed last year, the default budget clouded everything, but some things did pass, I believe. Okay, so last year, John, the facilities requested 500,000 for the building maintenance capital reserve fund. Do you remember if that passed?
300,000,
It
I
was
believe.
300,000, and there were specific projects that it was going toward. So there were details
Mhm.
with price points.
It was 300. Why am I looking at the warrant articles for, they changed? I'm looking at 20.
We dropped it to 300 in
Mhm.
recognition of the impact on the Jack-free tax rate, which
During the hearing.
last year would have been, I
That's
think,
right.
$4.50 if we
All right.
hadn't.
And then 200,000 for the special education contingency fund,
75,000,
went down to what?
75,000.
Did
Okay,
either of those
dropped it
pass?
for that
Did
reason.
that?
That
It
passed.
passed.
I do think Laurel's logic is correct. That we put in an amount that gives us some money to work with for next year with the time to plan for a bigger cell, community education. Especially if we're going to be trying to get a budget passed this year that's over default. I think we need to have our ducks in a row for that. We can outline all the things. I think we need, updated numbers because of inflation. I would want to be accurate. There's also another thing to think about down the road. We're gonna need to be looking at, and this is what I would put in the, maybe add another 50 or so thousand for the architectural work that we would need to have to propose a improvement to the, or a new or renovation to the ATC portion of things. Granted, if we get approved, the state should pay 75 cents on the dollar of that, but we still need to do the planning up front. But that's gonna be something that we have down the pike as well. But maybe, some just general. That can actually possibly even in one way help us sell a lot of what Laurel's talking about with this little project here, this little project. None of them are little, but comparatively speaking, projects here. To say we're just, we're taking this year to address things. So my point being, 250, I would put as 300 is my, for some architectural work.
Okay, and that would be a separate warrant, not the building maintenance trust fund, but an emergency fund, is that?
No,
No,
it all can be in,
It'd be in the building maintenance trust.
it all can be in the building maintenance trust fund.
so you're proposing 300,000. That essentially is gonna leave us with very little for windows and doors. And so 300,000 is what you think that we could get approved, is that?
Well, let's put it this way. Charlie had a good point in looking at 300,000 is $65 for Jaffrey. And it's $50 for Ringe. Which doesn't seem like a huge amount, except that you also have a budget that you're looking to pass as well.
Plus, there's the state one that's going through too, which is what, $1.99, you said, per 1,000? Carrie,
I'm sorry.
the state one, the state portion of the
SWEP.
school, yeah.
Is the SWEP?
It was what, $1.99 or something like that. Do we know if that gets shown on the ticket?
No, it does not.
Consider, let's just use $150,000 figure for JRSA. It could be a little bit lower, it could be a little bit higher than that. But I think that's probably, you know, within the average, it's gonna be more than 100,000 for that year. So we're talking about, you know, $34 at Jaffrey and 25 for Ringe. For that warrant article, so add that to the 65 and the 50. You've got 100 in Jaffrey, just about, not quite, 90. No, 100. And for those two articles, and then 75 in Ringe.
What did Charlie give you for information?
He said the average home in range was $250.
250.
I'm using $250,000 home.
Wow.
We've
Okay,
used
so
the
but we-
$200,000 home for about 7 years now.
Yeah, it's not that anymore.
No,
What about student services?
student services,
She's smiling.
Because I pushed a button. I should-
Oh. That was a big number.
What do we have? What do we have right now? I would say I would put at least enough for one placement, which is at least 150 for in not a non-residential, residential placement could be up to 500,000.
but the 150 would get us the 500,000, is that correct? What's our current amount again?
To something.
It's just shy of 3. 299, 98, 97. 85.
299, 971. So 150 would get us to 1,000.
We'll get you to 450, yeah.
So that would be my recommendation.
Are there other warrant articles we're looking at besides JRSSA, building maintenance and student services?
No new projects,
Say it again,
no new
there's
projects.
no new projects. All right, and are we setting the warrant articles now?
We're trying to decide what they would look like, so we know. We have an idea of what we think the voters would accept in terms of the proposed budget.
Okay, and then JRSSA getting close to agreements, but do you have a general number? Or did you just give us that? That's.
I think Ruben just said more or less.
Okay.
I used a middle ground number.
All right,
So that would be another 34 cents. So student services would be another 34 cents for Jaffrey and another if I'm reading my handwriting correct, 25 cents for Ringe.
On 150,000,
Yeah,
it'd be
Should be-
14 and 11.
it'd be what?
It would be 14 cents for Jaffrey and 11 cents for Range.
Oh.
Because you're going to 159, 200.
Oh, okay.
All right, let me start the ball. Because we still have a budget hearing. There's numerous times that these numbers can change. Let me get the ball rolling. I would like to propose Lisa's proposal. Funny name, people, funny name. But I would like to propose that for our operating number.
Mhm.
The 30,661,733. So I'd like to make a motion that we put forward that number.
Say that number again, please.
30,661,733.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Okay, discussion.
My choice would be to run with the original proposed. Because the rest of them, the administration has indicated that they can live without. So it's something that we can live without. As far as there were the buy it side of it, I believe it was around 329K. I believe I would support that coming out of the retained funds to cover that. So we would be getting that. The other stuff would not be getting, and the proposed budget would be exactly what it was to start with.
So Charlie, are you talking about the 31,200,000? Are you talking about the one they proposed today? Of the
32.
I'm talking about the one proposed on 1210.
okay,
32. What number is that, Charlie?
that's the,
It,
Proposed with a pre-buy.
I believe he would be referring to the 30,388 or 30,000,000,
Yeah,
388, 139.
yeah. Charlie, can you give us the number that you're proposing?
Well, we can put it up on the screen, Nick can put it up on the screen for us, that 30,388,139.
Versus Lisa's proposal of $30,661,733.
Right.
So
thank
the
you.
difference on the taxes, on a tax bill of those two numbers is roughly, no, that's what, 240. Yeah, so you're talking probably around $50 in rent, Jaffrey, and slightly less than that. $40 in Ringe. Those are estimates just by eyeballing. I didn't do the math.
that almost makes up for the warrant articles though. Like 58 cents per thousand.
Right. Good chunk of them anyway.
Right.
Right.
So Lisa, you made the motion, right?
I did. I guess I don't want to edit it.
And
So I
then,
think we need
and
to vote it
then
down and
you
then.
seconded
redo
the
it.
motion, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and there was discussion. like,
Okay, so you're saying we need a vote. So, any further discussion? Anybody else want to chime in? This point?
I would. I'd add more on the lines of what Charlie's saying, just with the warrant articles that we're proposing. Or would potentially be proposing. You're talking about the average increase in range, if we were to accept, we'll go with Lisa's proposal and some warrant articles, like what? probably $800 for the average household in range increase. Not saying that we don't need it, because I'm just trying to think of what can we get to pass.
So my feeling is, as we're going forward, that there are at least 3 more meetings where these numbers will be adjusted, moved, and decimated. I would like to give us a starting number that I feel, I know, Charlie, you had said you felt the administrator could do without. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing ways that they are constantly cutting things that are necessary. I would like to start with what I'm hearing is least necessary. And I know that these numbers can still shift and will, because we don't know the JRSSA numbers. We don't have exact numbers for what we want for the building and for the special needs. So without those, let's start with a number that we can work with and go forward on. Let's get a number today. So I guess that's why don't feel like I want to edit the numbers down right now. I think that this is the bare minimum we should be editing down.
Okay, and so before calling for a vote, I have a question on the number that you proposed, Lisa, and I think you've been fairly clear, but just want to make sure I'm understanding. We're talking about the difference between 30,661,000 and 30,388,000. And that would include the addition of the assistant principal position. Correct?
Slide,
The subs,
slide number 6.
no, not this
Not
one,
these, no, slide 6.
the possible
Possible,
reductions.
possible reductions. All right, so my recommended proposal was eliminating from this slide 168,785 increased permanent subs and 44,300 variety of smaller student services lines, only those.
So still eliminating the assistant principal position. No.
No,
Keeping that.
no, say one more time. Yep, the only eliminations from this would be the increased permanent subs for 168,785. And the variety of smaller student services, 44,300. Those would be the only eliminations in my recommendation.
So a little over 200,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now could you go to that last slide again, just which shows the 2 numbers, the one that was proposal number 2. Now we've got Lisa proposal number 3. Okay, I just want to do some subtraction, that's all.
We added 500,000 last year.
Okay,
And I'll just go and say what I said before, I respect whatever decision is made here, and we'll do whatever we can. Our kids, we're hitting stride, we can continue, and we have the right support. We're going to be successful. We're going to do good things for this community and continue to do so in a larger way. And none of, these children in Jaffrey and Ringe, the future of these 2 towns. And I say future because I don't even believe that I'm saying that, because their future right here and right now, but they also have, many years to come. They're worth this and a lot more. And they are worth fighting for. If that's the message that I think a strong community values education, wants to improve their community, wants to have vitality, needs to have a mindset of what can we do for our future? What can we do for our kids? What investment? And I know it's tough during hard financial times. But we have been also saying that for years, and I'm sure we'll be saying it for years to come. It's always difficult. The way we fund things in New Hampshire is crazy and burdensome to the local communities. Our kids deserve better.
Okay, well, thank you, Ruben, for that input. Is, if there's no more discussion, then let's have a vote on the motion. So, Daisy, I'm gonna start with you.
Aye.
Christine,
Aye.
Paul,
No.
Lisa,
Aye.
Charlie? Charlie, I don't know if you're still there with us. I realize.
Sorry, no.
Okay. And I'm gonna vote yes. And I thank everybody. I do think it is true. We'll have several options to, several additional opportunities to review this and to receive input from the community as well as. And I thank everybody for their input. This is it's a very tough, tough situation. Thank you. We've discussed our warrant articles. But we haven't done much more than that. We know student services is not finalized. Do we want to take a shot at? Sorry, JRSSA is not finalized yet. But we have our student services and our building maintenance trust fund warrants. Do we want to have further discussion on them? Do we want to try and at least initially finalize those numbers? What's your pleasure, folks?
I have to leave, John, but I would support whatever the rest of the board wants on the warrant articles.
Okay, can I make a motion then?
Charlie, thank you very much for your participation today.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yes, Lisa, please.
I would like to make a motion that we place on the warrant a total of $300,000 for the building maintenance fund, and I don't have all the language in front of me. So, and can I do multiple, or do you want to do one at a time? We'll do one at a time. Building maintenance fund, 300,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion. All right, I'm gonna offer some discussion. I don't think it's enough.
Right.
You know, again, I think that the community does support these schools. I think that John has put out some pretty compelling points today. I think sometimes it's not just a question of knowledge, it's a question of remembering some of the things that people already know. The fact that these buildings are as old as they are, the fact that there's aluminum foil found in a fuse box and a jumper that two circuit breakers jumped together. An empty abandoned septic tank underneath a ramp.
Underneath the preschool, yes.
So I mean, people understand that these buildings need to be maintained, and these things that I've just mentioned that John told us about today they're nothing new. If you go back to last year and the floods that we had and the pipes that broke under the Pratt. It's a constant battle, and I think people understand it, and I feel like the 300,000 is well, that's
You have a number?
Yeah, I would go at least 400,000, recognizing that's still not enough, but that's better than.
I would modify my. God, I'm losing it. Okay, I will modify my recommendation to 400,000, and I confess a little frustration because. If we were setting these today, it would have been good to have a number, like it would have been prepared, good to have, I know that there's a million things to get done.
1.2, as he was saying earlier.
I know, yeah, there really is. And believe me, I mean, after our conversation last year, I still remember the horrors of the images of these places in these buildings. But this shouldn't be random. Like, I don't go to those meetings. I go to policy meetings. I go to the goals meetings. I don't go to those meetings. So coming today, I feel like we're randomly choosing a number. So that's fine. 300,000 was put out there, so 400,000, let's try it. We can't go much higher. It was cut last year. Just, we need a number to start. 400,000 seems like a reasonable number as well to start. They're all. Yeah, I'm not trying to sound impatient or get us out of here. I swear. It's just, we know that these numbers will change. It is better to start a little higher. Because from experience, I know that once we take off any of those little pieces, we're not going to see them again. Like, it's not that we're gonna say, oh yeah, let's put back that assistant principal now. We found them, that's not gonna happen. So let's start a little, 400,000, great. Let's use that number. So I will modify my recommendation to 400,000, please.
I would second it.
And we'll second, okay, thank you.
I just
John.
wanted to say something to add to that. I know last year when we did have all these numbers, that we tried to get a starting point of $500,000, which was knocked down to 300. But we had all these numbers of the windows and the doors and the parking lots and the drainage and all that, and we knew it was a tough time. So we tried to start with $500,000 to get a starting point. So it's not, to me, not pulling out a number out of the air. It's like having a beginning number to get towards the number that we got to get to, which is probably a couple $1 million. But I just wanted to add that it's the 500 was a beginning point last year to go against the numbers that we had already on the table.
Thank you, John. Okay, let's do a roll call vote, even though Charlie may not be here now. Charlie's gone? Okay, so then.
Was there a second?
Yes,
You did. Okay.
all second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries 5-0 on that one.
I'll make another proposal, another motion to accept 150,000 for the student services fund.
Is that what she asked for?
Yep, just for 200.
To come out
Bare
of
minimum.
what?
That's what we're gonna, that's right.
Because that's is it going to be raised and appropriate 150,000 or come out of the existing up to 150,000? If there's more money left over in the budget, like a surplus. How does that
Right,
usually,
so for either one of these
for both of them?
warrant
both
articles,
conversations, yeah.
you can either choose to have it come out of any unassigned fund balance that's remaining as of June 30th with no additional tax impact, so there wouldn't be a tax impact on a warrant article because you've already raised it this year. Or you raise and appropriate, so you would raise the taxes for those amounts next year. But that would then take out from your unassigned fund balance at the end of the year that's possibly allowed to retain into next year.
I guess my intention on both motions is raise and appropriate right now. That is my intention.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so some discussion then on that. And for this purpose, invite our budget advisors also, if you have anything to add, please do.
Sure.
Sure.
So I'm gonna chime in with something. I'm gonna anticipate that because of the challenges relating to hiring, that we will have money left at the end of the year. That this could come out of. Allowing us to put this 150,000 on there without a tax impact. So from my perspective, that would be the way to do it.
Well, because we're in talks right now that we're gonna take 300 plus from our unassigned fund balance, if that's the way the board votes.
Right.
Do you think we're gonna have enough to replenish that plus the 150 at the end of the year? On your best educated guess, which is super educated.
Have the ability to retain, I think, a little over $1 million next year,
Mhm.
rather than the 901 that we have right now. So we still need 420,000 for gas, student services and facilities. Gives us a couple $100,000. Then you're talking about another 150 and then another 300, that's another 500. I'm
Maybe
sure.
not both of them, just like the 150.
Just the 150.
Just the 150. Well, then you're talking about pre-buying some items, though. That was the
Right.
300 somewhat thousand out of the unassigned fund balance. So
Correct.
now you're talking about 500,000 total coming out of that. I don't know, it's close, we could,
Yeah, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
However, just for clarification, if we didn't have that much. At the end of the year, we wouldn't have to. Raise our unassigned fund balance to that full million. Is that correct?
you have the option to retain up to 5% of your current year's net assessment. If it's available in your unassigned fund balance.
Right.
So the key is that it has to be available.
So if we were to have the 150,000. And spend it,
If the 150,000 for the special education trust fund. Was coming out of the year on unassigned fund balance, then that would reduce. Your total balance. And if it went below the million that we have the ability to retain, you can only retain what's available.
right, so instead of being able to retain $1 million, we might only retain. 900,000 or
Correct?
850.
Yeah, that's correct. It's up to 5% that you can retain.
Right. Okay. So we have a. We have a motion and a
Do we
second.
feel we should edit the motion still? To say, instead of raise and appropriate, to be taken from the remaining sum. That's, so I'm willing to edit can we have that discussion of what Kerry just offered? You made a very good recommendation. It was sound science behind it. Should we put it through the unassigned fund?
I
rather
think it
than
would be a
raise and
helpful
appropriate?
tool for us in terms of the tax impact.
Yep.
Okay, then let me edit my motion to, instead of saying raise and appropriate, to use the language for that would keep it out of the tax impact. Okay, so I'm okay editing that, if you're okay seconding that.
Okay,
I'll second that.
and the second, thank you,
Okay,
Christine.
thank you.
All right, so if there's no further discussion, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes 5-0. Okay,
What's next?
is there any other business for us?
JR, I said, we just not do that right now.
Well, I think we need to wait on that until we.
Yeah, the board we have to finalize with them and then we have to bring it to the board for.
Okay.
Moving forward. A vote to move forward.
Okay,
The only other thing, this is, was, that had been brought to my attention was conversations because Conval, Messina, Jaffrey Ringe create calendars together. We do this in advance. There's a lot of time to weigh in and so forth. We are slotted to have school on the 23rd. As of a week ago, Conval also was the case. Scenic, I think so too, but I can't remember. Have to look at the calendar. Because we have the CTE programs and so forth. So there have been individuals who have asked, might we follow suit with that? Philosophically, I think it's a good idea. I think from the standpoint of it's that would make sense. Stay in line with the schools that we continue to stay in line with. On the flip side, we also have a situation where if we do that, we have a large number of individuals who would not get paid to work on that day and could have that could be an issue for them, seeing as they would then not get paid through the holiday week and then come back and then have to have money taken out of their pay for whatever health care and so forth. It's their net would be pretty small coming out, and so I certainly don't want to harm anyone financially that way. So I knew that it's been a buzz and it's a conversation. I figured I'd just lay it out there and just.
So Monadnock is doing an early release, paid early release of 3 hours for all staff. So the hourly staff that would be affected with that will get 3 hours pay. Is that affordable for us? I literally was going to be recommending that myself. It is something that's going around, busing's, a thing. So can we afford to do 3 hours early release on the 23rd? Making sure that custodial staff had that same option evening, getting 3 hours off of theirs would not affect anybody who, people couldn't take an early lunch and added to it. This is only for that day. This isn't something they could carry over. Is that fiscally, could we find that money?
The money for the day is already budgeted. So it's in the budget. So not having the day at all then causes a difficulty because you have to either add it on or we have to decide that we don't want to do that. But if we don't want to do that, then there's people missing an entire day of pay, which does make a big difference for the lives of many. The half day, the day exists. And so
My
that's happened.
hesitation in it
And then, yes,
was actually, and I'm really pleased that Nikki at least is still here, was that the elementary schools have an early release day on the 14th. 1 week before we'd be doing a second early release day. Any concerns? Would that be hard for parents to stomach? Would that be hard for? That's saying here, 1 week we're doing.
I'm a parent of an elementary student and my job, I have Friday afternoons off. So for me, it makes no difference. I'm going to get my kid at noon or I get her at 3. However, I am only speaking for myself in that matter. There are 300-ish kids at JGS. That's a lot of parents who have banked on them being in school full day
Extra shopping time for them.
before they have them home for an entire week. And if we make it a half day, yes, our teachers get paid. That's amazing. What about all those parents who now have to take a half day because they can't leave their 5-year-old home alone? There's 5th graders that don't get left home alone. So you're then impacting 300 kids, and that's just JGS. I don't know how many RMS have. And you're impacting that many families the Friday before Christmas.
Yeah, there's an impact to the families as well. Yeah. And not all around the equity conversation. Not everyone is on the same playing field when it comes to working arrangements. Arrangements at home. So is a lot to think about. It's not an ideal time to make a decision of like this. I just want to bring it forward because it is a conversation that has been buzzing around.
We're also discussing a change in their schedule 2 weeks. That's the time frame. Because they would all get alerted today and have 13 days, 12 days to make their plans.
What's the impact? So you said that Conval just did this. So what would the students that are in these constructions and trades be doing those for that? What is it? 2
Sitting in
blocks?
the library.
Ooh.
And there is a petition circulating to get the day off. Just so you know, it's gonna be presented. to the board.
I've been approached by 3 different groups of students and got some emails. But some people weren't really paying attention and were surprised that they had. Gonna gather out of it. The
Parents.
comment being that's the day before Christmas Eve, my family does this and that, the other thing.
Many people are planning on that anyway as a travel day for their holidays, so attendance would be low, possibly.
I have the school calendar in front of me that we approved May 2nd.
I'm not saying surprise, this is what we deal with all the time. People just not following along.
We approved it on May 2nd so that people would know what days we're off.
There's nothing
And
stopping parents from not sending their kid to school that day. If they want to travel.
There is, I mean, legally, there's truancy issues, I mean, you're supposed to, it's. I agree with you, but they're just a flat.
And there's a question of,
Is it day or not? Is it possible to send a quick survey out to? As a.
It would be impossible to vote on it in 2 weeks. That would.
The answer is no.
No.
You go from 15 days to 3.
I'd like you to send out that survey, because I bet you get the best response you've ever done.
Yeah.
I bet you'd get it back tonight.
Right,
Insight, what's your feeling on it?
When I look, so I just went into control, which is the active for dismissal plans. So a lot of families will put in advance things like early releases, early dismissals, non-attendance. So when I look for RMS and JGS on the 23rd, there is nobody currently marked already scheduled to be absent. That doesn't mean that families would have put it in that far in advance. We don't have preschool on a Friday afternoon. So our preschool families wouldn't be expecting to have school on Friday afternoon. I think that you could go. I think that no matter which decision you make, it'll be the right one for some people and the wrong one for others. I think that the impact on staff pay, particularly for our associates, is something to be considered.
So I have a question about this. If we were to decide to take a day off, despite the impacts on families, as the court just said, these both sides of it, could we make an exception and pay the affected staff? How should we do that?
Honestly, being in the union meetings.
Carrie's
Yeah.
scratching it.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a loaded question.
Okay,
Yeah. it is a
Okay.
loaded question.
well, no, that's fair.
In providing basically a paid holiday, that's not part of. Having sat through all of these.
And clearly, a number of us have been involved in discussing these very items over the past 2 months, so. But isn't there some kind of a? Never mind.
All right, I would like to make a motion, so let's do this, I'll add a motion, I would like to make a motion that we cut school by 3 hours for but make it paid 3 hours for all staff that would be affected by that. So I would like to have an early release day on the early release schedule, have lunches, send kids home after lunch on Friday, the 23rd. Any seconds?
Oh, I'll second that.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Christine. Now I have some input. My input is Ruben, what would you like us to do?
As new superintendent of the year. this
Yeah,
goes
that is
a
a good
long way.
The first decision is that, I'll tell you what, I think, I would tend to make the decision based upon the belief that there are, at this point in time, had this been a month ago, I would change what I'm saying, entirely. If we're going to have an early release, we should pay the people and not have them make it up. That's important. If we're gonna do the day, then we should eliminate the day from the whole calendar and allow those people to do that. I don't think that's the right decision at this point in time. I do think Daisy brings up a very valid point about families and schedules and kids, and so I think that has to be considered.
Can I also bring up another point?
Yep.
You do this for school year staff, you're gonna have a lot of year-round hourly staff upset about not having the time off as well.
No, she was saying it for everyone.
Okay, I thought it was just a
This
half
would be for
day.
all staff.
Yeah, well, she meant for half day for all.
So what does that mean?
So it's a
for, like,
3-hour early
custodian?
release.
It's already paid. It would
So,
mean that you would leave 3 hours early.
so if you're scheduled to be here till 4, you would leave at 1.
Right.
There are some weeks that have to work.
I think there are a lot, I think we have a lot of questions. And as much as I would like to do it right now, I can't advocate for the day off. And
You're dealing with a half day, literally 7 days after 7 school days after having an elementary early release day.
And none of the high school have had early release days on that schedule.
I know, which is what messes up a lot of the elementary students, because when they go home, the middle or high school sibling is the babysitter until mom and dad can get home. And so you're already on the 14th, sending all these elementary kids home with their siblings still in school. Yes, on the Friday, they would then be there, but you're still missing a half a day, and
You're missing Christmas parties.
you're missing Christmas parties because they're already all scheduled for that Friday afternoon.
My recommendation, we have a schedule. I say we stick to the schedule.
Yep. How many students go to Conval?
I don't know if it's so much the students that go to Conval, but we are cooperative districts. So when the districts around you all do something, it's difficult. It's double-edged. It's not just the kids that go to Conval. It's that all of the other, they're around us are making this decision. And then that impacts.
And so the kids who come here from Conval or Messinic, who would be scheduled to come here on Friday, they won't be in school, but we'll have school, so they will be missing. They'll be missing a learning day. here.
So Nikki, do you have something to add?
I think so. I think so. So I think the takeaway for me in this conversation is that I don't really hear many people feeling like there's enough boxes that get checked to say, yes, this is a good decision for our community and our students and our schools. But maybe as we go into the spring, we could consider this conversation as we develop the calendar for the next year. And that idea that having students, and I'm going to speak from the elementary perspective, that having our youngest learners in school the day before Christmas Eve after a full week of school is not, it is not going to be a day that we will capitalize on instruction and learning value-wise time, just of being able to manage excitement and eagerness to get towards Christmas. It's right there. It's the very next day is Christmas Eve. So as we look forward to the calendar building for next year, just to kind of keep this in mind, that maybe we try and not go so close to that holiday break. We are in a community where most, not all, celebrate Christmas. But, you know, there are other holidays that we don't acknowledge. We have not taken time off for some of our other families to celebrate the holidays that are a part of their culture. So, you know, my kids go to Conval. My kids will be off on that Friday. They're really excited. Luckily, they're middle and high school, so it doesn't impact me. But it's kind of late in the day to make that decision. So, but if we look again for, you know, what do we think about what's best instructional time? Maybe we consider this conversation when we make the calendar for next year.
So in kind of in support of that, in terms of the other big holidays that fall during that time, that is Hanukkah. Hanukkah actually ends on Christmas Day this year, oddly. But the difference between Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and Christmas is that those are evening celebrations. They're not typically celebrations that happen during the daytime. So while it's nice to have the kids home for Hanukkah, you know, you do the family stuff and the candles and the prayer at night at sunset. So it doesn't really impact them. As I told my kids in the same way. So yeah, you can't really make that argument.
When we make our calendars, do we contact Messinic and contact Conval and line up our vacations and days off so that it's the same?
That's what we did.
Okay.
The Conval's change came about as a result of the student-driven petition. I don't know about the students, but.
Are you okay if I had something also?
No. Of course.
You got 3 minutes.
I concur with Nikki's assessment about the educational side of it. I do say, as much as we in past years have really towed a strict educational line leading up to vacation, I do think it's going to be hard to do that this year because the people who have approached me and the petitions, again, there are 3 of them that I'm aware of that are circulating around. It's not so much kids saying I want a day off. It's pretty consistently that their families had do things traditionally on that day. So I don't suspect that we're going to have great attendance that day of school. So if you're worried about an educational loss at any level of the school, I don't think that's likely to be the case, and not for lack of trying. It's just hard to hold a class when you have, in the case of the CTE program that we host here, when the Conval learners are not here and we likely will have additional people out, the teacher's not going to do learning that day that's new or would then compromise all those kids who are out. And the same thing is going to happen with classes where you have large numbers of kids out. You know, it's just every year, the day before this vacation, you have a pocket out. My suspicion, based on the conversations I've become aware of, is it's going to be much larger than even in the past because it is Christmas Eve, which a lot of families do celebrate in a traditional year. So for what it's worth, I don't believe there's likely to be learning loss here from not having the school day either.
Okay, thank you. So
The board can, and so there's another side of this, you know, the whole precedence thing. The board can make a one-time exception. And not have it be precedence, but Carrie, what's the impact to the organization? Forget the money part. What's the impact of the organization if school were not there that day? It would be just a day for the entire organization, correct?
Well, that depends. If you have a no school day, that doesn't mean it's a day off for year-round staff. So the board would have to make it a paid day off for everybody. Or it would be a school day, and it's whether or not it's you make it paid or not, because the teachers, if you're reducing the school day, the teachers aren't impacted, but the hourly staff are. So they wouldn't be getting paid. So it really depends on how. I mean, John said he has staff that has to come in, so I don't know how you could give it off for all staff.
And there are some states that states.
But on the 23rd specifically.
Well, let us, for a while, you just say, wow, that's one thing to do. But
On Friday, the 23rd.
Or is that the
that
next
whole
week?
week, buses are saying they're doing, that people not here.
They're just,
That's Friday, but. I'm with the riders who get in, but I just don't know. It's not a whole lot of time to be shared. We have to. I don't know, games, you have games, make things that have to be cleaned done or any other. things
No.
during that day.
No, we have nothing on the 23rd.
So there are systems issues that would have to be addressed.
There are what?
Systems issues that would have to be addressed depending on the decision on how we're gonna handle payroll.
I would like to stick with my motion and put it to the vote of 3 hours for all staff paid. Early release day for elementary and high school. So then let's vote it down and be done, but
Christine is second. Right?
I did.
And any final discussion here, Ruben, before we plunge into. the-
Yeah, I mean, I'm irritated that we're having the conversation. I understand why we're having it. But. I just, whatever decision that we make, we just need to take into consideration. Clearly the staffing issue. And think about what Daisy said regarding families. And it sounds like we have a potential contradiction, or maybe with some families have one way and some families another way. I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I'm sorry. I bring it up.
Well, it's gonna come up one way or another.
Will we know for sure now? I just did a schedule of the contract.
That's, they're gonna vote.
They're voting right now.
Yeah,
They're
because we,
calling.
this would be like the last
Friday morning.
possible.
3:30 and it's snowed.
we're supposed to get a cycle in.
That could happen.
That would be
We're supposed to get a
fantastic.
cycle in.
Can we do a roll call on this?
Yes,
Daisy,
no,
Christine,
no, sorry.
Paul?
No.
Lisa? Yeah, and I'm gonna vote no. Good. All right, so.
She's the cool one.
So the motion doesn't carry, and so we have the option of doing nothing. Is that what we do, or is there something else that you?
Yeah, we can just keep it the same. I just, we need to have the conversation.
Well, then we would need a motion.
Motion to
Don't
adjourn.
return yet.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's all right.
This is quick, and I think you'll be okay. So we're planning on holding a public hearing with the board to discuss expenditure from the unassigned fund balance retention monies. Is the board opposed to also holding a hearing at the same time to accept the SAFE grant revenues as unanticipated revenue, because we need to also do that in a public hearing? So this would do them both at the same time. Do
Makes
we need a
sense.
motion for that? No, great. Okay.
A motion to adjourn.
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Uh,
Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody.